On March 15th, 2023, I uploaded a video in which I compared the legendary parkour zombie game Dying Light 1 to its sequel Dying Light 2's Stay Human. Despite the 95.5% like to dislike ratio, the comments section was a pretty mixed bag. This video was uploaded during a turbulent time in Dying Light 2's live service cycle, in which it was still receiving updates that ended up invalidating some of the points I made. It also wasn't the most, rational video of mine. And you don't learn new skills by doing parkour or combat. I said some pretty exaggerated statements, skipped over large swathes of important story information, and made all of my points based off of unreliable memory. A year and a half into the future, and nearly 500,000 views later, Techland have given Dying Light 2 various updates, as well as announced their sequel game, Dying Light the Beast.
You might unleash the beast.
A lot of people have also given me a fair amount of criticisms and alternative perspectives that have pushed me to replay the games for this video. Considering all of this, now is as safe a time as I'll get to making a definitive comparison between these two games with a more balanced and nuanced viewpoint. There's a lot to cover, so the way I'm going to tackle this monumental task is by first focusing on the main stories of the two games. With Dying Light 1, I'll give a quick synopsis of the story, then say why I like it, as well as talk about its themes, and some criticisms levied against the story in the comments from the prior video. I will then talk about the main story expansion for Dying Light 1, called The Following, again providing a quick synopsis, analysing how it builds upon the themes of the main game's story, and evaluating the primary antagonist of the expansion, the Mother, in relation to the antagonist of the main game's story, Rise. From there, I'll move on to Dying Light 2's main story, taking a slightly different approach. The game's story is quite long, so I'll be pointing things out as I go along until I get to the end. Once I do, I'll analyse the primary plot of the game by comparing it to another game with a similar story. I'll be making thematic connections and storytelling comparisons between the three games, and using these to detail how well they are handled within Dying Light 2. Once that's done, I'll look broadly at the side quests from both games and analyse how they complement the themes presented in their main stories based on some of the ones I did. I'll look then at the Bloody Ties expansion for Dying Light 2, again providing a small and brief synopsis before giving my opinion on how it handles itself and its story. The gameplay mechanics will come next, looking at both games' parkour and combat and comparing the two, as well as addressing the parkour elements of the Good Night Good Luck update.
I'm about to die, oh no!
And how the Gut Feeling update affects combat. I will then try and make a point about combat and parkour progression, correcting a major mistake I made in the prior video and evaluating the two in terms of how their story relevance and logic differs between the two games. I'll compare the heads-up display and user interface between the two games, because trust me, it needs it. I'll provide an analysis of the environmental and graphical design of the games, as well as addressing the nighttime changes made in the Good Luck Good Night update, and end with talking about a few extra annoying things like bugs and overzealous tutorials, in addition to my overall conclusion. There will also be one last section where I talk about the expansion turned standalone game, Dying Light the Beast, before showing you some bloopers and funny moments after the outro. Hold up. I've chaptered everything, so if you can't watch it all in one go, it'll make it easier for you to come back and pick up from where you left off. With the structure now laid out, let's get into forming a more rational viewpoint on Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2. Before I dig into analysing various aspects of Dying Light 1's story, I'm going to give a quick synopsis. The story revolves around Kyle Crane and his evolution from an unwilling villain into a stalwart hero for the survivors in the tower. He is a global relief effort agent who has been chosen to drop into Haran and retrieve an important stolen document from Kadir Rise Suleiman, the primary antagonist of the game. Crane gets rescued from Rise's men in the beginning of the game by Jade Aldemir and her boyfriend Amir, immediately putting him at odds with his global relief effort superiors, who want him to get close to Suleiman so he can snag that important file.
Destroy it.
What? Why?
It will force interaction with Rise. You can go under Brecken's auspices as an ambassador, if you will.
But there are civilians depending on this stuff.
The global relief effort make Crane do some reprehensible things to get close to Rise, like burning an entire airdrop of medicine to force the tower to negotiate, sending Crane as their envoy. This then leads to Rise also forcing Crane to do reprehensible things, like intimidating various survivor groups for money on Rise's behalf in order to prove his loyalty.
How about I break both your legs and drag you through the streets back to Rice's place, huh? And then he can explain to you that you should have cooperated.
Okay.
Eventually, Rise decides he wants to properly test this supposed loyalty, and asks Crane to turn over Jade Aldemir to fight in his arena. Crane is obviously apprehensive to this, and so begins working covertly against Rise with Jade. Of course, when this happens, several things begin to go wrong. Raheem, who is Jade Aldemir's brother and the one who teaches Crane the basics of parkour at the beginning of the game, dies trying to blow up a volatile nest in one of the neighboring towers. Dr. Zera, who treats Crane's infection symptoms and who is working on a cure for the virus with Dr. Camden in Old Town, gets kidnapped by Rise's men. Crane gets lured into a trap by this and is forced to fight in Rise's pit, during which Dr. Zera gets killed. Jade also gets kidnapped by Rise and is infected against her will. He forces Crane and Jade to decide between them who will live and who will die by throwing them the antizin Crane had kept from the airdrop he burned. Jade decides to inject Crane as he is about to turn, but in doing this she dooms herself to succumbing to the virus, and Crane is forced to end her life. The Ministry of Defense later attempts to carpet bomb Haran, and after several failed attempts of trying to stop it, Crane barely manages to get a message out that prevents the airstrike. After all of this, the global relief effort tried to sweep everything under the rug.
We want to offer you a chance to get out of that horrible place.
Oh yeah?
Water under the bridge, Kyle.
And try to convince Crane to continue to pursue the file, to which Crane rightfully gives them a piece of his mind.
And why would you do that? I never found out who had your precious file. You don't even have to pay the rest of my fee. You realize I know what was in the file. I knew you were going to exploit the virus.
Crane.
Oh my god. You need the cure now for spin, don't you? That's the only way you could get out of this. Try to convince everyone you were working toward a cure the whole time.
Rise then makes a deal with the global relief effort to extract him from Haran in exchange for the file, as well as Dr. Zera's research into a cure. He taunts Crane to come and meet him at the top of his tower to confront him. Crane does so, defeating Rise and preventing the file from getting into the global relief effort's hands. He tells them to do one, which completes his arc into a hero, fully turning against his superiors. Dying Light 1's main story was handled quite well in my opinion. A fair few people in the comments of the old video said they thought the story was cliché, and especially had an issue with Rise, believing him to be a really cliché villain. On the surface, I can understand what they mean. Rise behaves like a very cliché villain. He's very unreasonable.
You promised me 2 crates of it. This is only 5 vials.
Easily irritable.
Crane!
Highly pretentious.
Prove you are a man. Good. Take your vengeance.
Will you just shut the f*** up?
And an overall douchebag.
All of this, and still you had your choice made for you. Disappointing, Crane.
But I think that just because he is these things, that doesn't mean we should dismiss him as cliché, especially if we haven't considered the themes of the game and the messages Rise preaches throughout the story. The primary two themes that run through the game are nihilism, the belief that all values are baseless and is usually connected to extreme pessimism, and futility, the belief that an action is useless, ineffective, or meaningless. They're practically baked into the name of the game, fighting in a futile attempt to preserve an inevitably dying light. These two themes are the lifeblood of the game's story, and begin to rear their heads in the second half of the game, where everything begins to go wrong. What I find interesting, though, is their connection to Rise and the message he preaches to Crane within the pit. Rise says to Crane that chaos is the natural order of the world, and to pretend otherwise is foolish. Though this sounds like a typical cliché villain monologue of a madman, he does have valid reasons for believing it. Karim, Rise's primary quartermaster, tells Crane about Rise's backstory in one of the few missions you do as part of showing your loyalty. In it, Karim details how Rise was a military leader tasked with maintaining order in Haran as its acting governor. When the outbreak occurred, Rise made a request to the global relief effort to extract his paraplegic brother Hassan from the quarantine zone, but the Ministry of Defense denied his request. This led Rise's brother to be killed by infected, which disillusioned him from the global relief effort and turned him into the warlord we see in-game. It is no wonder then why he sees the state of the world as a chaotic mess that cannot be reasoned or bargained with, and the way that the story plays out and the thematic messaging of the game supports his view. Throughout the game, Crane loses Rahim, Dr. Zera, and Jade, many people who he had grown close to over the course of the game, to circumstances which he had almost no control over the outcome. This mirrors Rise's situation with his brother. But what I think makes Rise such a good villain here is that he has an effect on our protagonist Crane. By the end of the game, Crane is so fed up with having his fate decided for him that he finally takes matters into his own hands, something Rise actually wanted him to do.
Let's ask for a decision, asshole!
He constantly taunts Crane throughout the game for this, and when Crane finally does so, it's a satisfying moment to witness, even if it is done in a rather unsatisfying QuickTime event sequence. But what I think truly makes Rise a great villain is his worldview of the natural order of the world being an unreasonable chaos, continuing to be proven to ring true even in the DLC and side quests. This will be something to bear in mind when we get to those sections. In general though, even if you don't want to look at things this deeply, Rise still does a good job of being a villain. He does an exceptionally good job of hindering the protagonist and getting in his way. He seems one step ahead all the time, and his clashes with Crane gradually become more personal. He has understandable motives, despite being an unlikable, irritating douche, and killing him at the end of the game is satisfying. The way he acts might be cliché, but to me there's no doubt he does a good job of being a villain, with some nuance and understandable grievances. To balance out my view on the main story of Dying Light 1, however, I do have to speak my thoughts on how poorly handled Jade was, particularly with the hallucinatory sequence that occurs just before she turns. Jade has this weird love-hate relationship with Crane because she blames him for her boyfriend's death at the beginning of the game, as well as Rahim's death at the volatile nest. However, she also cannot deny that Crane has done so much good for Brecken and the people of the tower, and she admires his determination to do right by her and those who were being treated unfairly. She doesn't really get a lot of development beyond this throughout the game, and we only really do one mission with her to steal the explosives at the school, leading the player to not really feel massively connected with her, especially during moments where she avoids Crane. So when we roll around to the moment in the museum when Crane is hallucinating and Jade is explaining her entire backstory,
I was born premature. The doctors didn't think I was going to live.
it feels like a forced last-ditch attempt to make her death more emotionally impactful than it ends up being. I feel like had this moment of vulnerability been brought up earlier in the story, and we were able to see the relationship improve a little between Crane and Jade before they're placed in a situation where one of them is guaranteed to die, I feel like it'd be a bit more emotionally impactful in my opinion. Besides that, I don't really have any other qualms with Dying Light 1's main story. It does a great job of establishing the world of Dying Light and has a very unique take on the infected and survival within the zombie apocalypse. Roughly a year after its release, the game's story got expanded upon in a paid expansion known as The Following, and it only further solidifies Dying Light 1's status as a legendary zombie game. Despite the relative simplicity of The Following story, it is widely regarded as much better than the main game. Crane learns of a potential new cure for the virus from an injured and delirious man from Haran's countryside. Since the tower is running dangerously low on antizin and airdrops into Haran have been stopped by the Ministry of Defense, Crane ventures there in the hopes of finding the cure the man describes. When he gets there, he encounters a settlement called Jazir's Farm and learns from a man named Khan the inhabitants are part of a cult called the Children of the Sun. Their leader is known as the Mother, and Crane learns that they worship her because she is the supposed source of this cure. However, Jazir is not willing to assist Crane in getting close to the cult unless he helps them first. Crane then goes through a series of tasks in order to earn the trust of the cult through side missions and story-related quests until his trust level increases. When it is high enough, Jazir lets Crane know that in order to get close to the Mother, he has to get the attention of the Faceless, the Mother's most devout followers. Ever curious of the source of the Mother's supposed cure, Crane continues to gain the trust of the people of the countryside. Eventually, the Faceless recognize Crane's actions and invite him to come face to face with the Mother. Upon reaching the commune, he gets to see firsthand what the source of the cure is, a mist that, when inhaled, makes the infected ignore you. He also begins to briefly hear the Mother communicate with him telepathically before blacking out.
No, this can't be happening. Can't be.
Believe in me, Christ, as I believe in you.
Who are you?
When he comes to, he is ecstatic, believing that he's on the verge of acquiring this miracle substance. He radios Lena and the tower of his progress, but the signal is weak.
Lena, thank God. Listen to me. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'm immune.
Barely allowing Lena to frantically state that the tower has run out of antizin medication.
I understand, Kyle, but please hurry. We've run out of antizin.
Ever vigilant, Crane seeks to continue to assist the Children of the Sun more. Jazir advises Crane to visit Attila, a man knowledgeable on the Mother, as well as the cult and its practices. When he meets Attila, he details the history of the Mother and how she was the wife of the countryside's colonel. He also tells Crane about the prophecy of the sun, that when the world is ravaged by plague, one man will accept the mercy of the light through an act of ultimate sacrifice to cleanse the land and purge disease. Attila makes Crane run a few errands for him until he asks him to retrieve a red Children of the Sun mask. It is depicted in one of the nearby murals that the man in the prophecy wears this red mask. When Crane returns the mask to him, Attila thanks him for his help and asks that Crane leave him be. After some time, Jazir asks Crane to check up on him, only to find that he attempted to invoke the prophecy of the sun and failed. Jazir's final task for Crane is to secure some missing vials of the substance used to create the mist for the mother. This, however, proves difficult, as the remnants of Rise's men are the reason why they're missing, and you eventually learn that they're being led by Khan, the man who welcomed you at the beginning of the game when the cult was apprehensive. Crane manages to defeat them and snatch up the missing vials before driving to the dam to prevent their assault against the mother. When Crane gets to the dam, however, everyone is already dead, and the mother reveals the true nature of the mist, turning people into sentient volatiles. Crane has been breathing this mist the whole time, which is slowly and gradually turning him, and drinking the liquid form of the vials accelerates this process drastically. The mother offers Crane a choice: to invoke the real prophecy of the sun by inputting the code Attila gave him into a nuclear warhead, wiping out Haran and the virus with it, or defying the mother in the hopes that she is lying and take the supposed medicine back to the tower. The canonical ending, as confirmed by the Dying Light developers in their announcement of the Beast, is that Crane defies the mother. This turns her hostile, making her force Crane to drink the liquid mist and commencing a fight between them. After Crane defeats her, he gathers what vials he can, desperately believing them to still be a cure, and frantically tries to make his way back to Haran. As he wades through the sewer tunnels, however, he hallucinates the mother's voice inside his head and struggles to walk and remain conscious. When he makes it out of the sewers, he realizes he's made his way outside of the Haran quarantine zone. He sees a mother and her kids playing in a playground and attempts to approach them. The mother screams out in terror, however, and when Crane reaches out to calm her, he notices that his flesh has withered into that of a volatile. As the sun begins to set, and as the screen fades to black, Crane lets out the Night Hunter's roar. As you might have already been able to tell, the themes of nihilism and futility are much more potent within this story. Throughout the entire expansion, the situation in the tower becomes more and more dire, and just as Crane believes he's found the cure, it turns out to be a poison. There really is no good ending for the characters of this story. They all either die in a nuclear explosion or succumb to the virus. The twist ending is exceptionally well done here and plays really well into the themes of the story. The side quests playing a larger role in gaining the trust of the cult was also a stroke of genius, and as a whole they're also very thematically consistent. One of the highlights was the mission where you had to go and check on a guy called Sabit, who lives in a cabin secluded away from other settlements, only to find he was dragged below his house, turned into a volatile, and bound to a nest. With what remaining humanity he has left, he screams out that it burns, and expresses a desire for you to just end his suffering. It's a quest filled with despair and perfectly foreshadows the later events. The mother is a very interesting antagonist within the Following, as she's a lot more sympathetic than Rise was. It's almost difficult to consider her a villain, as everything she does within the story is purely out of love for her people. When you meet her, she details how she came to know that the mist was a poison. When she discovered these vials, she drank them, believing them to also be a cure, but instead she became a volatile and tore her comrades to shreds. When she regained her consciousness, she realized the hopelessness of the situation she was in, but the people of the countryside did not have the knowledge she had. So she created the cult, with the intention of giving her people hope of something to believe in, so that when the time came, her people would be accepting of a swift and painless death. Her motivations are understandable, and her hostility towards Crane's desperate ignorance is also somewhat justifiable. They're just two people in dire circumstances who want what's best for those under their wing, but due to Crane's vigilance turning into desperation, they ended up having two radically different views on how to deal with the situation. It is loaded with nuance and ethical debate, but the one thing I have to criticize about it is its lack of acknowledgement for how it elevates Rise's worldview in the main game. You see, when I saw how people talked about the Following, it was either praised as if it was a standalone entity, or more commonly, it was praised in reference to how it was better than the main game. What I think people have failed to see is that the Following is directly connected to the main game story, even if the events seem radically different. This is why when I saw people criticizing Rise for being a cliché villain, I was a little taken aback. Rise's nihilistic view of the world being an unpredictable chaos that can't be resisted comes full circle in the Following when Crane's last hope of saving his friends turns out to be a poison. It irks me that his dialogue about this view isn't echoed in the end to really hammer home this narrative genius.
Chaos, Crane.
What? What's going on?
Chaos is the one true order of things. But to pretend otherwise is the sheerest folly. Allow me to demonstrate.
Not only would it show how Rise's worldview was a highly accurate and intelligent observation, but it would also heighten the extent of Crane's ignorance. I believe this is really the only criticism I can levy against the Following, as otherwise it is a near faultless addition to the main game. It is with a heavy heart then, though I'm sure it will come as no surprise to viewers of the previous video, that I can't say the same for Dying Light 2, even after replaying it with all the updates and additions. As you can probably tell by the chapters on the timeline, this section is going to be very long because the story is so modular. There are several different outcomes that can play out across the entire story depending on who you side with and the choices you make. Due to this, I'm going to take a different approach with my analysis of Dying Light 2's story, criticizing it as I go rather than attempting to sum up the full story in one big synopsis. To help you understand what I will be criticizing though, I have compiled categories of several reoccurring issues that will pop up as I analyze the story. These include problems with the pacing and writing, problems with the stakes and threat levels of scenarios and enemies, and problems with the presentation of factions and characters. Just a quick note, I have played through the story siding with both of the primary factions of the game. I played through the Peacekeeper side when the game initially launched, but the gameplay that you'll be seeing for this video is my most recent playthrough of the Survivor side, with all of the updates in place. With that being said, let's get into Dying Light 2's main story, he said through gritted teeth. It is important to understanding the story that we look at the events leading up to the sequel. I genuinely think my previous video's introduction to Dying Light 2 sums it up perfectly, so let's rewatch that here. Dying Light 2 opens mentioning everyone in Haran died, and the GRE managed to develop a vaccine for the Haran virus, effectively ending the pandemic. The only problem is they continued to experiment with the virus despite saying they weren't, and a second outbreak occurred. This strain of the virus was even more deadly than the Haran virus due to the fact that antizin and the vaccine failed to stop it. The only thing that could prevent the infection spreading was ultraviolet light, but it was not a cure. The entire world eventually succumbed to the virus, and practically the entire world's population was dead, besides a handful of scattered settlements. Aiden, the main character, is a pilgrim who ventured between settlements but came to Villador, one of the largest settlements, to find his lost sister Mia. The entire plot of this game revolves around you basically interacting between three factions: the militaristic peacekeepers, the independent survivors, and the violent renegades. Before we get into that though, we need to look at the prologue. So much happens within the prologue that it took me 2+ hours to finish. It seeks to establish several aspects of the story. It establishes Aiden, our main character, and Spike, a now-aged quartermaster from Dying Light 1, as having a mentor-student relationship, and detailing their journey towards Villador. It establishes Aiden's traumatic childhood, in which he was experimented on by the primary antagonist of the game, Vincent Waltz, who used the zombie virus on Aiden to give him superhuman abilities, alongside his sister Mia, whom Aiden is hoping to find within Villador. He has nightmares about these childhood events that plague him throughout the game. It also seeks to establish the importance of the GRE key, and establishing Waltz as the supposed leader of the violent renegades, and also whom the key should be kept far from. It shows how Aiden gets infected from a volatile bite. It shows Aiden's first interaction with the independent survivors faction and his later disdain towards them for trying to hang him. And it establishes Hakon as a major character, and how he helps Aiden get into the survivor-controlled bazaar by assisting him in getting a biomarker to help monitor and manage his infection. Once this is acquired, is where the prologue comes to an end. There are several very odd things that occur within the prologue, and it has several issues that I take umbrage with. Randomly, at the first half of the prologue, Spike turns to Aiden and says,
Hey, everything all right?
Yeah, just rats.
I think it's time we parted ways.
Why?
I'm starting to worry about you. And you know our saying, if you're starting to worry about someone, it means it's time to go.
But then the game continues as if he'd never said that, and they're sharing a beer and being all cheery, and then they part ways anyway. The way their relationship here plays out is weird and confusing, and it felt like this line was supposed to come later, after Aiden showed some concerning signs of possibly being infected, and not when he was just startled by a loud sound. Like, why is this a concern? This was the first sign of a problem with this game's writing, and to some degree its pacing of the story. Aiden becoming infected by a volatile was also annoying, because the first game presents volatiles as this major threat best to be avoided. Their threat level is built up over the course of the first half of the game, until you finally encounter them face to face in an adrenaline-filled chase sequence that demonstrates why they are to be feared. Here in Dying Light 2, they're not only being immediately shown in the literal beginning sequence of the game, but they display, at most, the threat level of a fast variation of the normal zombie, the viral. This is the first instance of the game having a massive issue with establishing consistent threat levels and high stakes. The independent survivors trying to hang Aiden the second he arrives in the bazaar reveals an issue with how the factions are presented. Them trying to hang Aiden is bad for several reasons. The independent survivors are meant to be the faction we sympathize with most, as soon after, they're presented as being oppressed by the peacekeepers, and they also have the best endings tied to them. Additionally, the peacekeepers are presented as overbearingly authoritarian and having a flawed and unfair justice system that rashly and hastily hangs people, yet here are the independent survivors doing the exact same thing. This inconsistency in the presentation of factions is a major issue that pervades through the entirety of the story. The last issue I have with the prologue that I found was the nighttime sequence with Hakon. After acquiring a piece of military-grade tech, night falls on Villador and Aiden starts turning. They run over to the bazaar, but they won't allow Aiden in without a biomarker. When Hakon shows them the military tech they acquired, they shut off the UV lamps in the hopes of killing them for it, which, again, the survivors are meant to be the sympathetic faction, but that's besides the point here. Hakon tells Aiden he knows a place, and they run over to Killian's house. Cue the most drawn-out, boring sequence of you having to kill virals to defend Hakon while he shouts and bangs on Killian's door. I find this bit hilarious when Hakon shouts to keep them busy, and Aiden turns around like, keep who busy? Which is an accurate summation of this entire sequence. Also, why are the virals only attacking me? Why is Hakon not helping me? Why is this taking so long? Why are the virals just standing there? Where are the volatiles? Compare this to the sheer terror of the first game's nighttime chase, and you can immediately see the abysmal drop in threat level and stakes here. The threat of night was an iconic staple of the first game, and to see it butchered here in the opening sequence, no less, is painful, to say the least. Moving on to the first half of the game, things don't get much better. The first half of the game sets up Aiden's primary objective of getting to the central loop, as apparently someone there has information on Mia's whereabouts. Unfortunately, the Peacekeepers control the underground area that leads to the central loop, and they've sealed it off because someone killed their commander. They won't let anyone through in the hopes that they can prevent the killer's escape and catch them while they are trapped within Old Villador. Aiden and Hakon attempt to sneak through anyways, but Aiden ends up getting captured by Aitor, the new commander of the Peacekeepers in Old Villador. Despite the overly harsh interrogative approach from the sergeant,
Maybe we'll start punishing you by cutting off your hands. That would improve your memory, huh?
Aitor, by contrast, appears very level-headed here.
You're looking for someone. Maybe I can help you, but not for free.
I'm used to trading. What do you need?
No nonsense.
Hi guys,
That's
Mr.
good.
Waffles here.
My name is Edward Victorfen. Would you like a Percy Pig?
And offers to lend Aiden a hand if he can find out who killed Commander Lucas. He informs Aiden of the 3 signs of the killer, whether or not they have Lucas's brass knuckles, named the Lazarus, if they have a wound from the Lazarus, and if they have the carved out flesh of Commander Lucas's rank tattoo. Aitor wants Aiden to use his newcomer status within the bazaar to infiltrate and ask around, and he does so, which is how he comes into contact with the leaders of the independent survivors, Sophie, Barney, and Carl. They know an alternative way into the central loop, but also have an interest in finding out who killed Commander Lucas, so they can prove their innocence. Knowing that both factions have a route into the central loop, this is where the game starts offering you choices on who to side with. The 2 factions are fighting for control of a water tower that supplies Old Villador with clean water. You can give this water tower to either the Peacekeepers or the survivors, and this takes up half the runtime for this half of the story. After giving the water tower to either side, Aiden tracks down the Lazarus to a little girl who is selling it for money. You then investigate Barney's residency, in which Hakon plants the skinned tattoo of Commander Lucas. When you discover it, you of course don't know whether Hakon placed it there or not, as this is a discovery you find out later, but you can either confront Barney about it as he catches you snooping around, or you can rat him out to the Peacekeepers. If you rat him out, you end up entering the metro tunnels to do something for the Peacekeepers, I can't remember what it is, and get captured by the survivors. If you confront him, you have a little bit of a scuffle, but afterwards you kinda just go back to helping the survivors. They come up with a plan to drive the Peacekeepers out of Old Villador by blowing up the windmill powering their UV lamps, which Aiden supports them in this case. Whether you blow up the windmill or get captured by the survivors, the bazaar gets raided by the Peacekeepers. If you sided with the Peacekeepers and get captured, everyone in the bazaar dies. If you sided with the survivors, you fight the Peacekeeper Sergeant, and the people, as well as the leaders of the bazaar, survive. Not long after this, Hakon is then revealed to be the killer of the Peacekeeper Commander. He gets shot by an unknown female assassin, and when Aiden attempts to treat Hakon's wound, he discovers the mark of the Lazarus on him. Here you can choose to either help Hakon or abandon him. In either case, he lives, but whether or not you help him determines if his relationship with Aiden is irreparably damaged. The surviving leaders of the bazaar let Aiden know after this where the alternative route to the central loop is, as a thank you for saving them. When he gets to this connecting point between Old Villador and the central loop, however, Aitor and the Peacekeepers find him and aren't too pleased. Though even if you actively choose to work against them, all they really do is push you around a bit before they agree to help you find Waltz. And this is where I get into my gripes with this chapter. The storytellers clearly like the survivors more, even though they are absolute dicks.
This is the thanks I get for helping?
Death is how we thank traitors. You didn't say you were working for Ader.
I don't work for Ader, I work for myself.
The Peacekeepers are presented throughout the entire first half of the game as much more level-headed and friendlier people, even if you choose to actively work against them. This is a massive inconsistency with their presentation as overly militaristic and authoritarian overlords.
They treat people like that too.
I sided with the Peacekeepers in my first playthrough because of their level-headed and friendly demeanor, but even on this run, where I purely sided with the survivors, I still liked the Peacekeepers more, despite the multitude of hardships the survivors faced. Even if you side with the survivors, they're constantly suspicious of you, frequently turn against you, actively try to kill you several times, and are just complete a-holes.
You brought the Peacekeepers here.
I helped you.
You betrayed us, and now we have to kill you.
The Peacekeepers do absolutely none of this when you side with them, and you never fight any of them unless you side with the survivors, in which you have to kill the sergeant. I honestly do not care that Hakon framed Barney. Barney is a complete prick, and so is Sophie. Even though you're siding with them, you're fighting them half the time, which to me makes absolutely no sense and made it immensely difficult to believe that they were the sympathetic good faction in all this. Again, yet more evidence of the inconsistency in faction presentation. Additionally, I found choices barely changed the trajectory of how the story plays out in the first half of the game. Giving the water tower to either faction does grant you differing faction-specific rewards, as well as unique dialogue reactions relative to those factions, but the way the story plays out is pretty much the same. Sparing or killing Jack and Joe in the water tower doesn't really do anything different either, as they either die here or later in a Peacekeeper cell. Siding with the Peacekeepers or the survivors also doesn't change the route with which you end up entering the central loop. It only changes the nature of how the Peacekeepers will greet you when you get there. This is pretty much the first instance of an issue with the choices you can make in the game not really feeling like they matter much. Also, ousting Carl as the main leader of the bazaar in favor of Sophie felt really odd. Carl is presented as this priest-like leader who believes that the bazaar should be a place of community and anarchy, where everyone can live how they want to. Sophie and Barney, however, see him as this weak leader who is rather suspiciously passive towards the Peacekeepers. Sophie randomly has a heart-to-heart with Aiden about how her mother used to run the bazaar, with Carl as her right-hand man. Soon after she remembers all this, she confronts Carl with Aiden, Barney, and a couple of other bazaarians. She basically waltzes in and says, "I'm the captain now," and Carl just gets the hump and walks out. It's such a weird moment that happens way too fast, which shows again an issue with the story's pacing. Besides these issues though, the first half of the game is mildly okay. I'd even say this half is honestly the highlight of the game, because things get so much worse in the second half of the game. It is in the transition to the second half where Waltz comes fully into the picture. After dispatching the Peacekeeper troopers and Aitor, Waltz steals the GRE key from Aiden. When Aiden awakens, he chases Waltz into an abandoned car factory and gets the key back after Hakon's assassin Lawan shoots Waltz in the shoulder with an arrow. He starts to go berserk, however, and a chase ensues, which leads all the way to the central loop. How convenient. From here, you go to the fisheye with Lawan to meet a fresh set of characters. Jackmat, the Peacekeeper General.
Aiden, my channel's demolished.
Frank, the leader of the Night Runners, and Juan, a renegade spy. I just want to make a quick note that everything you do in the first half of the game practically becomes irrelevant here in the second half. The only consequences of your actions is the bazaar later becomes a safe zone again. Otherwise, almost every character besides Barney is of little consequence in this section. Aitor does feature in a side quest in which you can save him, but this has no bearing on the main story. After meeting this lovely bunch, Jackmat lets Aiden know he's preparing to take back the VNC Tower, as whoever controls it essentially controls the central loop. The problem is, the tower is a massive hive of infected, the likes no one has ever seen before, and it's extremely dangerous. He's gathering UV lamps in order to set up shop at the base of the tower, but he needs to get these lamps from his supplier Juan, who is a renegade spy. It is here where you can choose whether to help Juan spy on Matt, or refuse Juan's offer and help Matt track down the UV lamps. The only influence this has on the story is whether or not you get the choice to give the VNC Tower to the Renegades and continue Juan's quest to spy on Matt. Otherwise, the story plays out exactly the same. After helping the Peacekeepers turn on a substation and fixing the VNC Tower's electricity somewhat, they set up shop and camp out until tomorrow. The next day, Aiden goes up in the tower's elevator with a squad of Peacekeepers, and with their help, alongside some assistance from the Night Runners, Aiden makes it to the top of the tower. Here, you can give the tower to Frank and the Night Runners, or Matt and the Peacekeepers. Regardless of who you choose, Lawan meets Aiden at the top of the tower and reluctantly reveals her prior relationship with Hakon, to which they bond a little before she takes off the next day. There are so many issues with nearly everything leading up to the VNC Tower mission, and the mission itself, that I genuinely do not know how people can say this game is anywhere near good. Let's start with a faction presentation issue. The Night Runners are the independent survivors' replacement for this half of the game, and the storyteller's favoritism for this faction continues to be a running theme. But again, like with the first half of the game, their presentation is completely juxtaposed to the developer's intention. Frank is the leader of the Night Runners, but he's a hostile, combative, incompetent, blithering drunk who is plagued with PTSD from his previous attempts at taking the VNC Tower. He is unlikable in every sense imaginable, and even Lawan shows disdain for his behaviour. Shortly after meeting this idiot, the fisheye comes under attack by renegade forces, and Aiden, along with Peacekeeper support, manage to successfully defend the neutral territory. Jackmat, the Peacekeeper General himself, even shows up to ensure the situation is under control. In this cutscene, Jackmat looks like a competent leader, and even offers Aiden help in his quest to find his sister in exchange for assistance with taking back the VNC Tower. Whereas Frank in this cutscene has to be literally carried off screen because he's a completely incompetent knob who can't even walk straight, let alone think straight. Again, the storytellers want me to sympathize with Frank, and in some ways I could have if he wasn't an utter bellend.
Okay, but how can I get to the rooftop?
You can't. Nobody can. Now, fuck you.
But Jack Matt just outshines him in every way here. This is why, again, I sided with the Peacekeepers the entire way through the story the first time I played the game. But the discrepancies in faction presentation don't stop there. The Peacekeepers helped you throughout the entire setup of the VNC Tower mission, with absolutely zero help from the Night Runners, making Frank look even more incompetent and insufferable. Once everything is set up, you eventually go to Frank to ask him for some advice on climbing the tower, but he just calls you insane and stupid for even suggesting to try to do such a thing, and just continues to be a drunken, condescending prick. More on Frank in a bit, but I need to tackle another ridiculously stupid aspect of the VNC Tower mission before I come back to him. Before the VNC Tower mission, you spend a fair amount of time working with Peacekeeper Lieutenant Rowe, but I wouldn't say it's enough time to really bond with him in any meaningful way. Once everything in the VNC Tower is set up and a Peacekeeper presence is established, we get the infamous camp scene. And I want to call it this because it is probably the third most ridiculous scene in the game. In this camping scene, set the night before the mission, the game gives you this weird sequence of Aiden bonding with Rowe and the squad as if they've been through thick and thin. He has heart-to-hearts with them and builds up an instant camaraderie with characters he's literally just met, only for them to all die in the very next scene. This makes the prior scenes look like desperate attempts to build some sort of emotional impact to their deaths, which ultimately utterly fails, and again shows fundamental issues with the pacing and writing of the story. Additionally, there's a ginormous issue in this section with threat levels and stakes. The VNC Tower is made out to be this unimaginably dense hive of powerful and ferocious infected.
Did Jack maybe mention the creatures that live there?
I know it's dangerous, Luan. I have to do this.
I've heard there are things there. Things no one has seen. Or actually, seen and lived to tell.
But it's nothing like that at all. At most, you encounter 4 volatiles, around a dozen exploding zombies, 20 odd normal zombies, and 1 goon. I feel like these numbers should have been quadrupled and have several new types of infected introduced here alongside an absolute swarm of infected, similar to how the maintenance tunnels in Dead Rising look. This is what I expected from the VNC Tower. Not this. The VNC Tower is not scary, nor is it a challenge, and perfectly encapsulates my point about inconsistent stakes and threat levels. This is where I circle back to talking about Frank again, as throughout the entire climb up the tower, he is the most unhelpful on the planet. The only thing he does is tell you where the grappling hook is. Otherwise, he constantly doubts you, tells you to fly back to the fisheye and stop climbing the tower. Jack Mad, on the other hand, has fought tooth and nail to get Aiden up that tower, and even checks in on him.
Hanging in there, Aiden.
Hanging, jumping, and climbing, whatever it takes.
They give the rest of the dialogue near the end of the climb to Frank, again as some desperate attempt to give you a reason to hand him control of the tower instead of Matt, who has practically done everything to get Aiden into this position. Frank doesn't deserve to have control over the tower, and this is a hill I will gladly die on. This point epitomizes the issue with faction presentation. And if you thought that was bad, wait until you hear what happens after you give the tower to one of the factions. Regardless of which faction you give the tower to, Lawan scales the entire tower by herself in a fraction of the time Aiden does. The tower which, by the way, is supposed to be filled to the brim with powerful types of infected, and the elevator we used to come up in is stuck. How did you get up here? And not only that, she slaps Aiden in the face because he ruined her shoes because apparently he forced her to climb the tower. No, the f*** he didn't. which is why I promptly responded with the "Are you serious?" dialogue option, because this is the only justified choice for this stupid interaction. Where are the stakes? Where is the threat level in this game? I find the scenes with Loan after the mission equally as ridiculous too, as throughout the entire thing, she's mad at Aiden despite him literally single-handedly restoring the Night Runners and pulling off the most legendary feat in the entirety of all of Villador solo. Her outrage would make a little more sense if you gave the tower to the Peacekeepers, as she's not overly keen on them.
I hate those fuckers. Ro, Meyer, they're solid. But Jack and Juan, they're destined to stab you in the back.
But even if you give the tower to Frank, she reacts in exactly the same way. She didn't have to climb the damn tower, yet she did anyway, and seemingly unscathed despite how dangerous the tower is supposed to be. She's just angry and insufferable all the time. And in fact, all of the survivors are like this, which is why in my main save I sided with the Peacekeepers the whole way through the story. The entire VNC Tower mission is the perfect example of everything wrong with the pacing and writing, the inconsistent threat level, and the contradictory faction presentation within Dying Light 2's story. And honestly, I wish that was where it ended. But there's more. I chose to give the VNC Tower to Frank and the Night Runners despite my better judgment, as we were going for the best ending, which leads to a questline from Frank to track Waltz. Hakon suddenly decided he wanted to be a part of the story again, and so summons Aiden through Frank to the church. Hakon confronts Aiden there, and he tries to get the GRE key from Aiden. He refuses to hand it to Hakon, and so a fight ensues wherein which you can either choose to kill him or spare him. We chose to spare him and convince Loan not to kill him, as later in one of the endings he comes to rescue Loan from X-13. No real explicit problems here, other than I personally really dislike Hakon, and it's this particular mission that really cemented my dislike for him, because much like the other survivors, he's absolutely insufferable unless you choose to spare him. It, yet again, really makes me feel like there's a serious problem with how they write their characters. Why am I going to side with a guy who has decided to kill me for the GRE key when last time we spoke I was trying to save him from being assassinated? You absolute muppet! What made you think it was going to work? What made you think it was going to work? Anyways, after deciding Hakon's ultimate fate, Frank is back on the line to let Aiden know he might have found a lead on a global relief effort scientist named Veronika. You actually meet her early on in the game. She's the woman treating Barney's injuries after the mission where you rescue him. When you eventually find her, with Barney's guidance, she takes you to an abandoned global relief effort observatory, where you learn that in the event of another outbreak, they had missile strikes prepared that would obliterate any major settlement in the attempt to contain the virus. Villador's missile strikes did not happen, but Waltz is planning to initiate them again for unknown reasons. You end up fighting him again, and midway through the fight, Aiden loses control and tears Veronika apart before blacking out. Upon awakening again, Waltz steals the GRE key from her, and a barrage of missiles hit the central loop. Loan rescues Aiden from the rubble and brings him to a safe place, but he feels he has to leave Villador due to his infection getting worse. Loan manages to convince him to stay, if not only for the fact that everyone in Villador will die to the missile strikes if he doesn't, but also in case Mia is still alive. There aren't many major issues with this section of the game. There is one, but I'll deal with a few nitpicks and oddities that I noticed first. This might be a minor nitpick, but in this mission it's revealed that Veronika is actually the Global Relief Effort Director of Research at the observatory, and was in a much higher position than Waltz, but absolutely nothing is done with this information. Aiden just gets a bit annoyed that she lied to him, and she then word vomits her entire backstory to him, and then they just continue like nothing happened. I feel like this revelation should have happened later on, and when it does, instead of Aiden getting a little bit moody, his infection makes him lose control and he tears her apart. You can still have Aiden be horrified by his actions, as she wasn't necessarily a threat to him, but it just adds a bit more depth and horror to what Aiden is becoming, and makes his viral outbursts consistent with other times where he becomes enraged and his infection takes over. Another thing I found really odd was the missile strikes just randomly happening at the end of the mission. I thought Waltz needs the GRE key in order to initiate them. Maybe he initiated some in the car factory and needs the GRE key to do the rest at X13? It's not quite clear. I know at the end of the game, Waltz says X13 is what's keeping Mia alive, and the missile strikes are just a byproduct of X13 being operational, but then if this is the case, why does he still need the GRE key? And if it is the case that he needs the GRE key to get X13 operational again, how are the missile strikes happening at this point? Do you see how this is confusing? I don't want to say it's hard evidence of inconsistencies in the writing, as I could be wrong and confusing myself here, but it was something that had me scratching my head a bit considering what I know of the endings already. Oh yeah, that major issue I said I found. Get this right. For some mind-boggling reason, the game automatically decides that Aiden tells Frank about the missile strikes. This is a major issue in the writing of the story and is ridiculously stupid, because if you give the VNC Tower to the Peacekeepers, Frank can't warn everyone to evacuate and is guaranteed to die in this path. Why would you warn a guy that you're not working with instead of the faction you've sided with that has the superior radio range to warn everyone? It feels like a forced plot thread for the sake of having a different branching path to meet the game's advertised Choices Matter slogan. Instead, it just shows the stupidity of the writing, as they have to force the story to go a certain way and make Aiden do something stupid in order to force the Peacekeepers side to have negative consequences and make them look bad. I'm pretty sure if Aiden warned the Peacekeepers if they had the VNC Tower instead of Frank here, the story would play out the exact same way as on the Survivor's side. Juan's fate also gets sealed in the Peacekeeper path, as he is discovered as a renegade spy and either goes into hiding if you've helped him, or is sentenced to death and hung by the Peacekeepers. This again feels forced given the fact you can't choose who to warn about the missile strikes. But because we gave the tower to Frank, the civilians get out safely, and Frank, Matt and Juan decide to meet with the renegades. During the meeting, Frank gets shot with a poison arrow, to which you can choose to help Frank or chase the renegade truck. If you help Frank, you save him with an antidote and still manage to chase the truck, so the choice doesn't really have an impact on the outcome of the situation. Either way, you're going to chase the truck, which sucks because there could have been a branching path in how you get into the renegade base, but I guess they wanted to wrap things up by this point. Aiden manages to catch up with the truck and uses it to infiltrate the renegade base and find the Colonel, the real leader of the real renegades, distinguishing Waltz's renegades as an offshoot of his military men. The Colonel explains he wants to help you track down Waltz, and this questline has a massive impact on the world within the game. If you choose to work with Jack, Matt and the Peacekeepers, you open the bulkheads of the dam and the water flooding an underwater city goes away, making that part of the map explorable on foot later. If you choose to work with the Colonel, the underwater city stays flooded, and you skip to encountering Jack, Matt and the Peacekeepers, as they disguise themselves as renegades in order to assassinate Frank. You get into a bit of an altercation with Matt, and he either gets convicted for his crimes if you sided with the Night Runners, or you fight him to the death if you sided with the Colonel without helping the Night Runners or Juan. Aiden then goes after Waltz and blacks out randomly when he sees him holding Mia in a tunnel under the destroyed car park. He has yet another nightmare about Waltz experimenting on him, before he wakes up miraculously teleported across the entire fucking map on the bridge above the car factory. From here, he descends into X13 with Luan. If you saved Hakon, he joins you both later on. If you kept him alive but didn't help him, he gets subdued by the renegades and questioned about his loyalty, and if you killed him, well, he doesn't show up. After fighting off the renegades, Aiden goes after Waltz, and it is here where the major choice that determines the ending comes in. After fighting Waltz to the death and learning the truth about Mia being Waltz's daughter, the GRE key gets destroyed by Waltz being a complete idiot. Luan says there is an alternative option to detonating the missiles before they launch in order to save Villador, but at the cost of her own life. You can either save Mia here, or save Luan. In quite literally every ending you do, Mia dies, but the best ending requires you to save Mia, while Hakon rescues Luan. There are 5 possible endings to the game. 1. The entire city gets blown up and humanity's last bastion falls to ruin. 2. The Free Peoples now control most of Villador based on ideas of community and family. Soup kitchens are established for the needy and the newly revived Night Runners guard against the still present infected. 3. The Colonel and Juan rule over Villador jointly with the new Bright Peacekeepers. On that day, 20 people die due to them being trampled in the food rationing lines, and the city eventually descends into a place of anarchy as Juan barricades himself aboard the Peacekeeper ship Missy. And 4, the Peacekeepers rule over Villador with an authoritarian grip, and on that day 6 people die due to problems with the water supply, and Jack Matt passes due to cancer, with Myers taking his place as General of the Peacekeepers. In all of these endings, Aiden leaves Villador, which is understandable due to what his viral outburst did to Veronika, but the secret 5th ending includes Luan leaving Villador with Aiden. I don't have a problem with the sequence before the endings, or necessarily the faction endings themselves. I do take issue, however, with how they handled the story with Mia. To understand my gripes with this though, I want to show you guys a game that I think does what Dying Light 2 tried to do with Mia, but far, far better. To understand why I chose to compare Dying Light 2 to Nier Replicant, you first have to understand the story. I'll give as brief a synopsis as I can here. Massive spoiler warning if you haven't played the games. Nier Replicant is set after ending E of the prior game Drakengard 3, in which the protagonist Kaim and their dragon Angelus defeated the end boss known as the Queen Beast by dropping it into modern-day Tokyo in 2003. As the Queen Beast crumbles, a fighter jet shoots down Kaim and Angelus, which unleashes a disease onto humanity known as the White Chlorination. This disease essentially withered the human body away until it was nothing but salt. In an attempt to avoid humanity going extinct, humans separated their souls from their bodies to become gestalts, and created android shells known as replicants to house their gestalts once the White Chlorination had passed. Nier Replicant takes place in the aftermath of all this, opening with several shots of a snowy city, in the summer of 2053. This is not actually snow, however, it's salt. The game follows Nier and his younger sister Yona, the latter of which is suffering from the White Chlorination disease. They get attacked by shades, and Nier struggles to fend them off. In a bid to protect his sister, he gives his soul to a mysterious book, later known as Grimoire Noir, which grants him the power to fend off the shades. When he returns to check in on Yona, he finds her with a tin of biscuits that she offers to split with him. She collapses, however, as she too gave her soul to the book to conjure this food. She figured that because he's always helping her, she wanted to help him.
You've always been the one helping me. So I just wanted you.
No! Yona! Yona!
but in doing so her symptoms seem to worsen. As their situation begins to look more and more hopeless, we are taken 1,412 years into the future, where Nier and Yona have settled down in a village headed by Devola and Popola. The first half of the game is spent showing Nier tending to and caring for Yona.
It won't be much longer, I promise.
Is this gonna make me better? Is my cough going to go away?
As well as lending a helping hand to the townsfolk. At one point, however, Yona wanders from the village and gets kidnapped by shades. Luckily, Nier manages to rescue her with the help of Grimoire Weiss, one of the 3 other major protagonists that join Nier in the first half. This is, however, subtle foreshadowing for later events to come. Nier and Weiss in the first half also assist Kaine, the second of the major protagonists that join Nier, in defeating the Shade mimicking her grandmother, as well as helping her rescue the King of Facade. They all then help Emil, the last major protagonist to join Nier, in realizing his power to turn things to stone with his eyes can be used for good. A whole host of other good deeds for the townsfolk later. The village comes under attack by a monstrous hulking shade that can regenerate its health almost indefinitely. The fight is sadly a losing battle, and amidst the chaos, a shade version of Nier, known as the Shadow Lord, turns up to steal away Yona. In a desperate attempt to seal away the regenerating monster and end the battle, Emil petrifies Kaine with his eyes and seals the library basement door, preventing the monster's escape. Both Nier and Emil are distraught by the outcome of the battle, and as they look to the sky, vowing to get their friends and family back, the screen fades to black. 5 years later, we are reintroduced to Nier as a fully grown adult, able to now wield a greatsword as if it were lighter than a feather. He's been searching for Yona during these years to no avail, but his vehement hatred for Shades has kept his passion for finding her unwavering and alive. Emil notifies Nier and Weiss that he may have found a method to reversing his petrification curse, but this means having to face his past. Nier and Weiss assist him in doing so, and after fusing with his twin sister, Emil is able to reverse the effects of his petrification curse at the cost of his physical appearance. After Nier comforts Emil and reassures him he cares more for who he is rather than his physical appearance, they both feel ready to take on the remnants of the regenerating shade and free Kaine. They return to the library and do just that, successfully defeating the monster and reuniting the 4 main characters. The rest of the second half is characterized by gathering pieces of a key that will unlock the Shadow Lord's castle, where Devola and Popola believe he is keeping Yona. Much of this half of the game is spent defeating various bosses that have a lot of philosophical and ethical themes behind them, that are only really fully realized when you defeat them again in Ending B. But for now, all you need to know is, the Aerie gets completely obliterated by Emil, who loses control of his power trying to destroy the Shade there, and evaporates the whole town. The gang assists the younger brother in the scrapyard to get revenge on the robot and Shade that killed his entire family. The population of the seafront significantly decreases due to the postman unknowingly bringing people aboard the abandoned ship on the beach to be eaten by a monstrous Shade disguised as a little girl. The Queen of Facade, Fira, who helps you earlier on in the game rescue the King of Facade, gets killed by a Shade leading a pack of wolves. The gang assists the king and his soldiers in defeating the wolves once and for all. And, something happens in a dream state with a Shade in a tree, but it's super boring and not worth talking about. Once they have all the pieces of the key assembled, the gang makes their way into the Shadow Lord's castle. Once inside, a riddle prevents them from continuing, which talks about separating soul from body. Once it's solved, You're greeted by Deviler and Popola, who try to impede Nier's progress. Once defeated, they back off, allowing them to advance through the castle. However, as they do, they're attacked by Shades, who eventually fuse together to form a near-invincible hog-like shade. When it seems again like all hope is lost, the King of Facade and his soldiers come to rescue our characters, telling them to continue on without them, as they fight the hog in honor of their fallen queen. Their fate is left unknown, and as our characters continue on, they are once again greeted by Deviler and Popola. It is here where they reveal the big twist of the story. The shades you've been fighting along the way are actually Gestalts, the twisted souls of humanity, and you are the android replicant shells which would house their respective souls. The Shadow Lord was the only successful Gestalt that retained his sentience, and is the only reason the other Gestalts still linger in the world, as they're all fueled by his power. The reason the other Gestalts failed is due to the unintended consequence of their replicant counterparts developing sentience, which caused their replicant bodies to reject their Gestalts, and this is the origin of the Black Scrawl disease that affected Yona in the first half of the game. Grimoire Noir, the book from the beginning of the game, and Grimoire Vice are the key to successfully combining Gestalt and Replicant in order to make them true humans again. But before this is explained to us, and due to the hasty rejection of this information from Nier due to his vehement hatred for Shades and his passion to save his sister, a fight ensues. Deviler is killed during the fight, which sends Popola into a wild frenzy that sees her overpower our characters. In a bid to ensure Popola doesn't impede their progress, Emile sacrifices himself to stop her. Distraught by the loss of their friend, Kaine and Nier eventually pull themselves together and make it to the Shadow Lord's lair. Upon seeing Yona, a fight between the Shadow Lord and Nier ensues. Midway through the fight, however, Yona wakes up and calls out to her brother. Nier offers out his hand to her, but she passes him by and instead approaches the Shadow Lord. She tells him that she can hear a voice inside her head crying, calling out for her brother, and that she feels uncomfortable using someone else's body. She points to Nier, realizing he's the brother the voice is referencing, and becomes visibly shaken. She wanders over to a nearby window, expressing her love for her brother, as she fades away into the light, leaving Yona's body behind. The fight continues, with Grimoire Vice sacrificing himself to destroy Grimoire Noir, the two beings necessary for restoring true humanity. This sends the Shadow Lord into a berserk, tragic, last-ditch effort attack. Nier manages to fight through, however, and knock the Shadow Lord to his knees. As Nier raises his weapon, the Shadow Lord gives one final anguished nod to Nier. As Nier shakes off the doubt behind what he's about to do, he slices through the Shadow Lord, creating an explosive cloud of blood and dooming humanity to extinction. In Ending A, we see Yona and Nier reunited. Kaine says it might be best for her to keep her distance, as she's too dangerous to be kept close. Otherwise, it is presumed a happy ending for these characters, as they go on and live out their lives normally until they die. In Ending B, however, it is revealed that the Shadow Lord and the Shade possessing Yona were actually the souls of the human versions of Nier and Yona that we saw right at the beginning of the game. We see them reunited in another plane of existence, to which Yona thanks him for always being there for her, and hands him his half of the cookie that they were going to share at the beginning of the game. He thanks her for this gesture, as they are engulfed in light, and the credits. By now you've probably clocked that Dying Light 2 and Replicant tell very similar stories, but if you haven't, Both tell a story of an older brother in search of his younger sister. Both deal with themes of hope and passion, as well as loss, nihilism, and futility. Both have similar apocalyptic settings, and both have twist endings. What I'm trying to establish with this comparison is Dying Light 2 fails at almost every hurdle with how it handles its story, and Replicant is an example of how it handles Dying Light 2's story better. For instance, the relationship between Aiden and Mia is poorly handled. Mia is quite literally absent for nearly the entire story, with her only showing up in occasional short flashbacks. We don't see her physically until right at the end of the game. This means we don't get any time to connect with Mia, learn about her personality, or bond with her to make us care that she's been taken away. In fact, she's already missing right from the beginning of the game. In comparison, we spend the entire first half of Replicant with Yona, getting to know her, caring for her, and ensuring her safety. Therefore, when she does get taken away at the midway point, and considering the condition our characters are left in when she is taken, we feel something. It's important to see the build-up to the point that a character gets taken away, and the emotional impact it has on the other characters. Replicant even goes a step further and technically takes away 2 characters at this point, heightening the emotional impact. This is more than can be said for Dying Light 2, which tries to achieve the same emotional impact, but fails because these are all events that have already occurred, and which we don't get to experience firsthand. Additionally, the apocalyptic setting of Dying Light 2 plays a very minuscule part in the story as a whole. This is why I feel a lot of people say that Dying Light 2 is a parkour game with zombies in it, rather than a zombie game with parkour mechanics like Dying Light 1 is. In Replicant, the apocalypse is so masterfully woven into the story that not only is it inextricably tied to every character in the game, but it is also the central driving factor in the twist of the story. Even in Dying Light 1, the apocalypse had sway over the story with the constant need for antizin and the global relief efforts' involvement in the potential spreading of the virus. Even in the following DLC, it became central to the endings, as well as recontextualizing Crane's actions throughout the entire game, as if some zombies could retain their sentience, then were you really killing mindless husks for the entire game? In Dying Light 2, the apocalypse is just there. Sure, every now and again, Aiden turns into a zombie and goes beast mode, killing everything in sight, but nothing substantive is really done with this. It either serves to get him out of situations he otherwise wouldn't be able to, kill off super important characters that the writers didn't simply want roaming around anymore, introduce the immunity mechanic, or conveniently teleport Aiden to places he needs to be for the story to continue. It's a convenience tool rather than something that adds to the story. Mia dying from the infection also barely adds anything substantive, and it ends up not mattering anyway. Mia tries to pull a similar move that Yona does in Replicant towards the end of the game, where she doesn't want to continue living at other people's expense. But whereas in Replicant, this is a choice Gestalt Yona can act upon and willingly does as an act of goodwill towards Replicant Nier and Yona, Mia doesn't really have any say in her predicament. The GRE key gets destroyed by Waltz, which prevents Mia from making this decision herself, leaving Aiden to decide what happens, and it is only by Aiden's actions that anyone can actually be saved. So not only is Mia absent for nearly the entire game, but she has absolutely no agency or effect on the story, besides motivating Waltz to destroy the city and motivating Aiden to save her. The story between her, Aiden, and Waltz has hardly any nuance to it. She's just a glorified MacGuffin that makes the faction stories occur. And even in those, the apocalypse and zombies are just mere obstacles. And even that isn't done well. VNC Tower. Yona in Replicant is her own character, and even though later she becomes a MacGuffin, she has far more nuance than Mia has, and has a far more drastic effect on the characters. The twist ending is also done terribly in Dying Light 2. In the end, Waltz isn't necessarily a bad guy, he's just a misunderstood and desperate man trying to save his daughter. This is almost completely disconnected from whatever else is going on in the story because Waltz and Mia are absent for most of the game, only popping up occasionally to remind you this plot thread exists. In Replicant, every element of the story comes together beautifully at the end. The character motivations, the apocalypse, the twist, all of it serving to recontextualize the entire events of the game. The following DLC for the first game also does a similar twist to a near equally great effect, with the supposed cure Crane was so desperately trying to find actually being a poison. In Dying Light 2, the twist ending is completely disconnected from most elements of the story. The faction warfare just feels more like an obstacle arbitrarily impeding Aiden's progress to find his sister, instead of focusing on faction warfare and faction politics that are very disconnected from the plot of finding his sister. The first half of the game could have been spent tending to and caring for Mia, in a similar fashion to the first half of Replicant. You could give Aiden a choice on who to side with based on promises of aid for his sister. If Mia is in the picture, she could be her own character, and have reactions to how Aiden acquires aid for her based on who you side with. Already that sounds like a much more interesting story to me, but sadly we got this muddled jumble of themes that Dying Light 2 is trying to unsuccessfully juggle, and to be honest, I think that's the main crux of the issue with Dying Light 2. Thematically, the second game is a mess. Replicant uses Dying Light's themes to great effect. Act 1 has a more upbeat, hopeful theme to it, with Nier displaying a healthy passion for assisting others in the same way he'd do for his sister. Then Act 2 flips these on their head, being more reminiscent of the usual themes of futility and nihilism seen in Dying Light 1. Nier's passion in Act 1 ends up becoming twisted and corrupted, turning it into something toxic and harmful by Act 2. I don't know what thematic messaging Dying Light 2 was going for.
You look at the infected like they're the disease. You fight them for the last ray of dying light.
It's especially confusing when you do the Survivor ending. Mia's death is supposed to be a tragic event that was futile to fight against, but its impact gets undercut by the game rushing right past this to present how much better life is under the Night Runners. Leaving Villador with Lawan also drastically changes the tone of the ending too, making it seem more hopeful. Even most of the soundtrack has upbeat tones of hope and joy. Despite the wild contrast to the conclusion of Mia's story, and most of the other game's endings that are more in line with the nihilistic and despairing tones we're used to. I feel the game should have put a lot more focus and effort into Aiden and Mia's story, in a similar way to Replicant. Have Aiden need to make tough choices on who to side with, and have Mia be her own character with opinions on Aiden's choices. Then have her stolen away later in the game once we've built up an emotional connection with her. In the end though, when I look at Nier Replicant and peer over to Dying Light 1, and then look at Dying Light 2, I see a lot of missed potential for a story rife with emotional beats and hard-hitting thematic messages. In fact, just to show you how much missed potential Dying Light 2 had, I want you to listen to this absolutely stellar delivery of this one line and the emotion in Aiden's voice when the GRE key gets destroyed.
No! Oh my god!
then imagine that same line being delivered as a distraught Aiden frantically tries to find another way to save Mia, but she instead sacrifices herself to save a love interest, delivering a hard-hitting line about not wanting to be a burden to Aiden anymore, after you've spent a fair amount of time caring for her and searching for her.
I just wanted to make you rich and get rid of this disease. I'm sorry.
The raw delivery of that one line epitomizes Dying Light 2's lost potential. When placed side by side next to Replicant, not only does it highlight how woefully undercooked Mia's plot is, and how thematically conflicting the story is, it also shows that with a bit of effort, the game's main story could have been emotionally gripping and presented its themes amazingly. The side quests in both games were actually a bit of a shock to me. They are, for the most part, thematically consistent with the main game's themes of nihilism and futility, and some even contrast these in a complementary way by having small fleeting rays of hope. But their presentation falls into two drastically different camps. They're either Shakespearean masterpieces or grade school drama levels of cringe. In Dying Light 1, I more often than not found that the side quests were way too goofy. Don't get me wrong, they are consistent in complementing the themes of nihilism and futility from the main game's story, but they present them in an unnecessarily goofy manner, and without the same seriousness and heartache as the main questline. There's several instances of this. Tolga and Fatine's questline has you working for these two tech geniuses who have a very elitist mindset, and so call you stupid in 17 different ways because you're a big burly man who fights things, and so they see you as a stupid simian ape man.
Who cares how his ape brain processes information?
How heavy?
Too heavy for you, simian beast.
Yet their questline involves you finding crafting parts for them so they can build an alternative method out of Haran for this rich dude. They end up building a submarine that comedically explodes the second it's out in the water, to which they then decide collectively to build a jetpack next, and the questline just ends on this humorous line. Yeah, it's got themes of nihilism and shows futility through their methods of escaping the quarantine zone, all ending in failure, but they're presented in such a silly way that it ends up hurting the game's depressing atmosphere. It's the same thing with Jeff's questline. Alfie in the tower notes there's no gas supply to the tower, and so instructs Crane to go and talk to Jeff, who knows about the gas system. He's moved out of the tower and decided to live in a reinforced area instead. When you meet Jeff, he's this caricature of an army drill sergeant and instructs you to turn the gas back on like he's a high-ranking military official. When you do turn on the gas again, he uses it to power his wall of death, which then comedically explodes and blows up him as well as his entire house. If you ignore the comedic elements of the side quest, it is pretty nihilistic and shows the futility of trying to better defend yourself in the Haran quarantine zone. Sadly, the comedic elements of Jeff being a stereotypical army drill sergeant and the comedic explosion of his house overshadow the emotional impact of this scene. And even Crane is highly apathetic to Jeff's death, which stands in contrast to how he reacts to Raheem's death.
Told you, he's irreplaceable.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid you're gonna have to find a replacement.
You goddamn stupid fucking kid!
Not all of the side quests in Dying Light 1 are like this, however. There are some genuinely good side quests that handle these themes exceptionally well. A highlight in the main game was a side quest at the Magic Fortress daycare, where a guy called Rupert the Gunsmith is taking care of some orphaned children. He's adopted the persona of a wizard in order to explain the outbreak as a dark spell cast upon Haran to the children, but when you meet him, he's struggling with the burden of taking care of them. One of the children is diabetic and is suffering without her medication. Rupert says his wife Jasmine is currently out looking for some and asks of Crane's assistance. Once you've helped him, one of the children asks if Crane can retrieve his blocks from the basement stairwell. While Crane is down there, he hears sounds of infected behind the basement door. He confronts Rupert about this, only for Rupert to admit his wife became infected, and he locked her in the basement so she didn't pose a threat to the children. He asks Crane to put her out of her misery, and after he does, Rupert thanks him. Crane arranges then for Troy and the Embers to give the children assistance, giving a fleeting glimmer of hope for them. There's no comedy in this side quest, just the raw, unfiltered depiction of depression and struggle that stands in stark contrast to the other side quests. This kind of raw, non-comedic approach to side quests thankfully makes up the majority of the side quests in the following DLC, at least from what I could tell. Tolga and Fatine sadly make a return to continue to insult your intelligence, which really makes me question why they've become such icons for Dying Light fans, but thankfully their side quests seem to be the only unnecessarily comedic ones we encountered. Since I've already talked about Sabit's quest, I'll talk about another good example from the side quests in the following. We Don't Go There Anymore is the name of a side quest given to you by the absolute lad Bilal, who notifies Crane of the dangerous sectioned off town just down the road. The locals believe it to be haunted by demons due to reports of hearing disembodied screams and such. The Faceless are apparently being sent to investigate the town, but Crane offers to help instead. It's a relatively simple side quest that requires you to scour the town and soothe the souls of these supposed demons. As you wander the town, however, the ambience suddenly shifts, and a cacophony of crying children slowly builds around you. The catch to the objective of the quest is you aren't actually dealing with demonic spirits, you're dealing with zombified children. They let out ear-piercing shrieks whenever you approach them, which drains your health and attracts infected. You must soothe the children and lay them to rest as part of the objective. Or you can do it the more controversial way. Shut your b****s up! I know I've been harping on about the seriousness of the side quests, but sometimes it's just inescapable. This quest does an amazing job of conveying the themes of the game, in for the most part a serious way. I found the ending of the quest to be particularly impactful, as the last child you will typically come across is at the far end of the town, in the back of a truck that has a diagram of these zombified children hung up on a wall. It's as if someone was experimenting on these children in order to see what effects the virus would have on them, and it serves as a tragic, hard-hitting end to the task, especially as the town falls silent. It's an amazing side quest to experience, and the ambience of the town during this task was phenomenal. You'd be surprised to hear then that Dying Light 2 actually impressed me with some of its side quests. One in particular really shows off how amazing the choice system could be, as well as presenting the primary themes of Dying Light exceptionally well. There's a mother in the bazaar who, if you talk to, asks you to help find her missing sons. If you speak to her more, you can find out she isn't doing too well in terms of money and food to help sustain her family. She says their friend that her sons hang around with might be able to tell you where they went. Upon speaking to their friend, he notes his dog ran away, and the sons went to go and help find it. Just before you find the boys, however, you find the dog laying on a sofa in critical condition. Speaking to the boys reveals they had actually lied to their friend and lured the dog away from the bazaar in order to kill it for food. You end up deciding the dog's ultimate fate before sending the boys back to the bazaar. They beg you not to tell their friend what really happened. When you arrive back, you're greeted by the mother, the two sons, and their friend all gathered in one room. The boy is confused as to why the dog didn't come back, and the entire family practically stares you down to lie to the boy. Here, you can choose whether to lie to the boy also, or tell him the truth. I told that kid the truth, because f*** these fake assholes. The entire family had a row at me for telling him the truth, and they kicked us out of the house, but I knew I'd made the right decision, because the kid turned around to me and said,
"Thanks for finding Buddy, mister. Now I'm sure he would have liked you. You're a good guy."
That had more weight and emotional impact behind it than the entire story of Dying Light 2's main quest. I didn't even care about the reward I got from the quest. That kid's approval was more than enough. It's such a well-designed and thematically rich quest that really encapsulates Dying Light's depressingly nihilistic theming, as well as exemplifying how much the choice system can add to a quest's emotional impact. Sadly, not all of the side quests are like this. This game still continues the trend of having a few unnecessarily goofy side quests, like chasing down a scarf for a woman who claims she cannot sing without it, and when you return it to her, she still can't sing well. From what I could tell, these were more rare in Dying Light 2, but the inconsistency in the tone of the side quests still persists. In all honesty, I think this is the primary area that I think Dying Light 2 really outdoes the first game, as the decisions you can make in these side quests feel really impactful within their self-contained stories. I definitely think the Following's DLC side quests are roughly on par tonally with Dying Light 2 in terms of the consistency and theming and maturity, but the second game really takes the cake with how well designed the side quests are, at least compared to Dying Light 1's base game side quests. Now, I know this is an odd spot to talk about Dying Light 2's only downloadable expansion, Bloody Ties, but honestly, it was so bland and forgettable that I almost forgot to put it in my script plan. The story goes that Aiden discovers a gladiatorial arena competition being held somewhere outside of Villador, and he decides to try out, where he meets his rival for the DLC, Chiro. Eventually, Aiden makes it to Carnage Hall, where the real tournament is being held. He discovers the tournament is being hosted by a former VNC Tower reporter looking to recreate her pre-apocalyptic fame. In order to win the tournament, Aiden has to beat a guy called Skullface.
No one hears the word you hope hatred might someday replace the pain. But it never goes away.
No, not that Skullface. This Skullface. A bunch of shenanigans ensue where you get involved in Chiro's family drama, and his father, Ogar, a former Carnage Hall champion, doesn't want Chiro to compete due to safety reasons. In order to progress the story, you have to complete various challenges and quests relating to the family. We eventually got so bored of the side quests that we just stopped doing them because they were awful and repetitive. Chiro later in the story decides he wants to start calling himself Cain. This is important because you learn soon after that Ogar had another son called Abel who supposedly died because Ogar wanted to leave Carnage Hall. Spoiler alert, it turns out Skullface is actually Abel. and was scouting you in the tryouts to be the new champion of Carnage Hall. He ends up killing Astrid, the VNC reporter running Carnage Hall, and everything ends up being hunky-dory once again. The story is meant to mirror that of Cain and Abel in the Bible, but in reality it doesn't, as in our playthrough, Abel doesn't die and Shiro didn't kill Abel. Maybe it does play out like Cain and Abel if you make different choices, but it is absolutely vapid both narratively and thematically. The only engaging moment in the entire thing is when Abel kills Astrid because it's sick as hell.
Abel, no!
I couldn't even tell if the story was trying to mirror Cain and Abel or not, and I'm completely bewildered as to what the themes were meant to be. This story expansion is nowhere near as good as the following, and is more comparable to the Bozak Horde from the first game. Except here, Bloody Ties tries to make a story out of it, which I don't think was a good idea. Despite my vehement hatred towards the Bozak Horde, I enjoyed playing through that a hell of a lot more than I did Bloody Ties. Hell, Bloody Ties has an Easter egg reference to Bozak's Horde in the DLC. And to add insult to injury, this hidden secret is actually more fun than playing the actual DLC itself, and even gives you better rewards, like a baseball bat capable of flinging zombies in a similar fashion to the EXP caliber from the first game. Oh god, and the expansion completion reward item is trash! It's this arm shield that you have to block with to charge up its special abilities, but the charge build-up is ridiculously slow, and you can only use it under very specific circumstances, such as in a slam move, counterattack, being grabbed, and so on. Yet Abel, during his boss fight, is able to fire stuff from it freely without needing to block your attacks or do specific moves in order to trigger its effects. It's absolute garbage, and a complete letdown to an already trash DLC. With most of the story analysed, I want to now go more in depth with the gameplay. I'll start with the traversal elements of parkour first. The best way I can describe the parkour system in Dying Light 1 is it feels natural. It starts out slow with amateur movements and a sense of struggle, but as you get to grips with the system and learn new moves, it becomes fast and snappy. Your movements become more fluent, and the vast array of moves you learn, like sliding to move through tight spaces quicker or wall climbing to get to higher ledges easier, are helpful in maintaining your flow. Admittedly, under certain circumstances, it can be a little frustrating at times, but overall, the system is very good at predicting what you want to do, so it's not too often that you'll find it to be troublesome. Dying Light 1 set a very good baseline for how the parkour system should be. Dying Light 2's parkour system, by comparison, leaves a lot to be desired. This system was improved upon in the Good Night Good Luck update, but it still doesn't quite measure up to the first game's parkour system. The primary improvement to the parkour that the Good Night Good Luck update brought to the game was adding more weight and realism to aerial moves by upping the gravity. Originally, you could jump so high and the gravity was so low that it almost felt like you were on the moon. Toning this down to be more in line with Dying Light 1, as evidenced by the name of the update used in its slogan, was certainly a good thing, but it still retains a sense of floatiness that doesn't match the first game. Additionally, I'd argue that on an objective basis, Dying Light 2's parkour system is worse. One thing that really irks me is the jump input having massive delay. It's something like half a second before the jump input registers. The button input for jumping in the first game is near enough instant, so coming over to this game and observing such massive input delay on the jump button was really annoying. What's more is that every move in the second game feels like it takes forever. If you added a second or half a second to the length of all of the parkour animations in the first game, you get Dying Light 2's parkour system. Some people may like these more cinematic looking parkour moves, but they're not practical when you're in a chase. Crane's parkour moves in the first game look like a guy running and climbing for his life. Aiden in the second game moves like he isn't even in danger. And what's even more annoying is there's no skills you can get that speed up the parkour, unlike in the first game. You'll be climbing at the exact same speed by the end of the game as you were at the start of the game, which makes parkour progression feel non-existent. The parkour system in the second game also has a lot of jank. It's super inaccurate at times, to the point where one of the Bloody Tie's indoor speedrun challenges becomes frustratingly and unnecessarily difficult because of it. I found more often than not the parkour system in Dying Light 2 frustrated me more than it did enhance the experience, which is a shame because there are a lot of cool additional moves you can do, like wall running and vault jumping. It's just a shame that they're all placed within an inferior parkour system. In regards to combat, Dying Light 1 also holds superior. The combat is visceral and violent, and the X-ray system and slow motion effects really hammer home the brutality of combat. The ragdoll system is definitely the highlight of the combat. It works near enough flawlessly and is so much fun to play around with. It adds a massive sense of realism to the zombies, as some of them will trip over each other and fall just trying to get to you, or will walk off the side of buildings without a second thought. It characterizes the zombies well as these weak, fragile husks that are only dangerous in large packs. It also makes every combat encounter interesting and unique due to the unpredictability of the system, as it makes the methods in which you can kill zombies nearly limitless. The weapons in the game are your primary source of damage, as most parkour moves, like the dropkick and grapple, are non-lethal unless used in the right circumstances. I almost don't have any gripes with this system, other than that certain skills feel a bit too circumstantial. Brutal Swing is a skill you can get for two-handed weapons that uses the weight of the weapon to spin it in a circle, hitting zombies all around you. But the only time you're going to use this skill is with two-handed weapons, and sadly, one-handed weapons in the first game are far superior, having much faster attack speed, and a few other extra moves you can't use on two-handed weapons, like the aerial takedown. It does serve to make each weapon class feel unique, but I definitely think if you've dedicated a fair amount of skills to a certain weapon class to make it barely passable, next to a superior weapon class that has almost no skills dedicated to it, you might need to do a bit of a rebalance. Besides that gripe, Dying Light 1's combat system is one of my most favourite combat systems in all of gaming, and, much like the parkour, sets a very solid standard for zombie combat. You'll be again surprised to hear that Dying Light 2 manages to be nearly on par with Dying Light 1. The combat is certainly still fun, and in fact, Dying Light 2 makes some improvements over the original combat system by making a fair amount of weapon-specific combat moves, like Brutal Swing, available on all weapons. It also makes some neat additions to your combat move repertoire, like the satisfying vault kick. Sadly though, this is undermined somewhat by a fair few problems the second game's combat system faces. The ragdoll system, even though it was supposedly improved within the Gut Feeling update, doesn't feel nearly as natural as it did in the first game. Some animations still retain their rigid scripted nature, like in the grapple throw or when certain zombies fall from buildings like volatiles. The best way I can describe it is it's visually obvious when a zombie is switching from scripted animations to ragdoll mode in the second game. whereas in the first game, the zombies always looked like they were in ragdoll mode, and even with some more nimble and animated zombies like volatiles, they seamlessly switch into ragdoll mode very naturally when they die. This just doesn't seem to be the case with the second game. Additionally, the gore and the gut feeling update feels rather excessive. It looks amazing for zombies like virals, banshees, howlers, and regular infected, who visually look more fragile, but when it comes to volatiles, goons, and demolishers, it seems overtuned. I mean, volatiles have armored skin, demolishers wear armor, and goons have really thick skin. I feel like it's more realistic that their limbs don't get chopped off, as they're incredibly tough infected types, so slicing through armored skin like butter feels odd. The guns update added back military-style firearms, even though the developers were staunchly against having them in the game, because it didn't make sense to players why they removed them, and was something the first game had that made it objectively better than its sequel. Their return in this update is certainly welcome, though what isn't is the long-winded quest line and grindy farm you have to do for special currency in order to acquire them. The Tower Gauntlet they temporarily added to the game in its beta stages made getting guns way easier and far more fun, but it was a temporary mode as of writing this review, which means others will miss out. If by the time you're watching, this isn't the case and the tower raid still rewards guns, then you can somewhat safely ignore this point. Also, the control key to aim? Seriously? Instead of the right mouse button? Jeez. Oddly enough, your weapons tend to not be your primary source of damage throughout the second game. They work wonders on volatiles and larger infected when upgraded and modded with elemental attacks, but against infected that can be ragdolled, and surprisingly even against all of the different kinds of human enemies, the dropkick did superior damage. This isn't true nearer the end of the game, but having a couple of parkour moves be your primary source of damage and not your weapons made combat feel less interesting and varied compared to the first game. Some button commands also overlap with other inputs in a rather frustrating way. Here I was trying to jump over a volatile, but it instead made me perform a vault, which didn't actually vault me over the volatile and just kept me in place, and I died because of it. There's a lot of jank like this in the combat system. In the first game, you could stun a zombie by jumping on its head, and then snap its neck upon landing behind it. In the second game, you jump unnecessarily high when you perform this maneuver, and when you land, you stumble. It's incredibly annoying and not worth doing, whereas in Dying Light 1, it's a cool little combo you can do. Hit detection is also whack! There's been multiple instances of me standing in front of a zombie, and when the swing looks like it should have connected, it instead misses at nearly point-blank range. Some skills look really odd too. The grapple throw looks super goofy, because if you perform it backwards, you launch the zombie like you've got the strength of the Hulk. Throwing the zombie in other directions isn't as wacky, but it still looks way too strong. But what's even weirder about it is it does next to no damage. Here's a clip of me literally launching a zombie at a wall several times at high speeds using the grapple move, and it simply just would not die. Regardless of these issues though, you'll still have tons of fun with the combat. But it's just this lack of polish that puts it a little below how well executed it was done in the first game. I made a point in my old video relating to combat and parkour that I don't think I presented or fleshed out very well. Essentially, the point was that parkour and physical progression are central gameplay elements in both of the games. The issue that I was trying to highlight is that in Dying Light 1, it contextualizes parts of the story, and it makes sense, whereas in Dying Light 2, it doesn't. In Dying Light 1, it makes sense, as Brecken, the leader of the tower, is a parkour instructor, who taught the survivors in the tower how to avoid the infected using his parkour techniques. The basics of this get taught to Crane by Raheem in a tutorial near the beginning of the game, which familiarizes the player with these mechanics. As Crane progresses, he gradually learns new moves and skills that expand his parkour and combat repertoire. This all feels very natural and believable, and he goes from being barely able to take on 3 of Ryze's thugs to a skilled combatant capable of posing a serious threat to the likes of Ryze himself. In Dying Light 2, on the other hand, the progression of parkour and combat feels off. Originally, I believed it was inhibitors that granted you skills, but they actually just increase your stamina and health. You get skill points by doing parkour and combat, much like the first game, but skills are gated off by certain stamina and health thresholds, leading me to believe my original point isn't entirely untrue. In the first game, skills are gated off by your parkour and combat level, so progression down the skill trees felt natural and tied to your skill within the respective trees. In Dying Light 2, you can acquire advanced level skills pretty early on if you just dump inhibitors into one skill tree. Sure, some skills are gated off by a need to learn a previous skill, but that doesn't change the fact that you can quickly scale down the tree to some advanced level techniques pretty quickly through considered inhibitor use, rather than your physical and technical ability unlocking and improving skills over time. Additionally, the progression doesn't make sense according to Aiden's character. He's a pilgrim who travels between the major settlements of the world in wastelands filled to the brim with infected. Only the most skilled and brave warriors would dare to face such a task, so you'd expect Aiden to be pretty skilled in the art of parkour and combat already, if he has to face down such a monumental task. Yet at the beginning of the game, he barely knows how to do parkour, and struggles to climb a small ways without needing an asthma pump, as well as not knowing how to do any kind of combat moves besides dodging and swinging his weapon. In fact, he was lucky to have managed to take down a single Banshee, and even that was a task and a half for him. The game tries to make out early on that Aiden is special in some way, saying he's stronger and faster than everyone else due to the experiments Watts performed on him as a child.
You want to know why Watts was doing those experiments on all of you? Why you are stronger, more durable than others?
But again, he can't climb to save his life, and if a pack of virals came at him at the early stages of the game, he'd be toast. The progression of the skills doesn't make any sense and contradicts 2 of Aiden's primary character traits, and I feel this skill progression was done better and more naturally in Dying Light 1. I think it's important to talk about the user interface, because wow does it wildly differ between the 2 games, and not in a good way. Dying Light 1 had a very pleasing user interface. Everything was organized, the color scheme was clean, and the use of text made it easy to understand what you were looking at from a glance. It's very easy to tell what's what, and also relatively easy to navigate through. The only real issue I have with the user interface of the first game is the crafting menu. If you want to craft multiple of something in one go, you can't do that here. You have to sit here mashing the enter key multiple times for 15 minutes or so to craft a large number of a certain item. Dying Light 2 fixed this problem, allowing you to craft several of one item at a time, but in exchange for this, they completely messed up the pleasantness of the user interface. Now everything is these icons with images you have to hover over to see what's what. It's like the developers were allergic to text or something. It also looks ridiculously cluttered and unorganized, making it difficult to find the thing you want or discern how much of something you have. The menu is so convoluted for absolutely no reason, so I really prefer the first game's menus to the second game's, and I'm not sure why they didn't stick with something similar. Oh, man, f*** the virals in this game, man. They don't leave me alone. Go away. I'm trying to get cinematic shots of the fucking environment. Go away. Fucking hell, leave, go. I have not made a sound. Look at this. I've not made a single noise. I'm using a suppressed weapon. All I've done is walk around. I thought virals were only meant to come out when you make a sound. Go away. Viral! I just want a shot of this area, man. Ah! Go away! F off! My God! One shot! I want to talk about the environmental design in both the games because I feel there's a notable difference in their approaches. Dying Light 1 has several different environments that are quite unique in their design. The Slums has a real mix of architectural design, mixing favelas in Brazil with regular urban architecture. There's lots of changes in elevation as well as wide open areas that allow for freedom and experimentation with parkour, and it feels realistic for the outskirts of the city. This environmental design stands in stark contrast to the second area of the game, Old Town, which is much more claustrophobic at street level, even in the more spacious areas as these tend to be overflowing with infected. There's lots of different levels of elevation in Old Town too. Below street level you have mini canals and areas running along the water, and above street level you have a labyrinth of indoor areas accompanied by sprawling balconies and finally the freedom of the open rooftops. Old Town definitely feels like an upgrade to the 3 elevations of the Slums in a few ways, and is far more challenging to be in, making it a highlight of the environmental design for me. Which means that, yes, Dying Light 1's countryside, introduced in the following DLC, wasn't my favourite. It feels a bit too open. I understand this is to incentivize using the buggy, but in doing this, they sacrificed a lot of solid environmental design. Don't get me wrong, there's still some very intriguing places of interest to explore, and it retains the immaculate, rich, detailed indoor environmental design from the base game. But there's so much empty, useless space between this that it hampers the environmental design to a noticeable extent. There's also only really one elevation, which is street level, and you'll be spending 3/4 of your time on that level anyways due to the buggy, which isn't really great. If there were more places of interest to fill out the large expanse of empty map, I'd be more inclined to say the single elevation stands out in a good way, as the richness of the environment is spread more horizontally rather than vertically. But sadly, this is not applicable to the countryside. I would still say though that overall, Dying Light 1's environmental design is solid, both in terms of the structure of the environments and especially so with the level of detail in indoor environments. The same thing cannot really be said about Dying Light 2. The buildings all feel copy-pasted with minimal changes, and the difference between Old Villador and the Central Loop is minuscule aside from there being taller buildings. Both areas have almost no change in elevation. The terrain is quite literally flat for almost the entirety of the Central Loop and Old Villador. For both areas, there's also only 3 levels of elevation: the streets, some indoor areas, and the rooftops. There's hardly any deviation from the structure anywhere on the map, and even if there is, like the underground subway areas, They're only there temporarily until you complete them. There's no real change in level aesthetic between Old Villador and the Central Loop either, compared to the aesthetical contrast between the slums and Old Town in the first game, making the environments feel samey. The level of detail in indoor environments is inconsistent. Some indoor environments have lots of clutter and environmental storytelling. Others are just a chair and table and quite literally nothing else. The overall environmental design here in 2 just isn't up to par with the first game's varied and rich environment. Hell, even the out-of-bounds map barriers are just really uncreative. I made this point before in my previous video, but I want to make it here again because I don't really feel like I did it justice. Dying Light 1 had really creative and immersive ways of keeping you within the bounds of the map, such as having caved-in debris, steep hills you couldn't climb, mile-high unscalable quarantine walls, and netting in the water, to name a few examples. They were neat ways of showing you A, that these were the bounds of the map, but B, they also made you feel trapped within the Haran quarantine zone. Sure, there's the odd invisible barrier if you go looking for it, but for the most part it's very consistent. In Dying Light 2, it seems like they wanted to make the map feel more expansive than it really is, and so opted to coat a large portion of the out-of-bounds parts of the map in toxic chemicals that rapidly speed up the rate of infection. I find this to be a really lazy and deceitful way of making a barrier for the playable bounds of your map, especially considering this gave me the false hope that I'd acquire some gear like a Night Runner hazmat suit to make these areas explorable. But sadly, its only purpose is to act as a death barrier, even if you fly over it. And what makes it even more annoying is that the out-of-bounds areas look way more interesting than the playable map we actually get to explore. There's even a large quarantine wall around the entirety of the area anyway. There's even interesting looking structures out there that look as though they could be explored. At least in the first game I understood that there was no way to reach some of these areas due to the bounds of the map being obviously established. I did genuinely think I could go outside the bounds of Dying Light 2's map eventually, and explore beyond the chemicals, which is why this is such a sore point for me. This is a minor thing I want to touch on, as I need to talk about the Good Night Good Luck update of Dying Light 2, specifically the nighttime changes made within the update. Dying Light 2's night system used to be based around the presence of howlers in the streets. They were these lanky, weak-looking volatiles that don't pose a threat on their own, but if they spot you, they'll scream, which will attract the attention of all the virals in the area. They used to be the primary method of getting into a chase, and were jotted all around the streets in the lower levels of the city. This was somewhat of an unpopular move from the point of view of most players, as they preferred when volatiles themselves used to patrol the streets, like in Dying Light 1. In the first game, volatiles roamed the streets, and are easy to hear and see due to their heavy, huffy breathing, and their skeletons being visible in Survivor Sense. They were a force to be reckoned with, and were extremely scary to go up against due to their speed, their strength, and most of all, their aggressiveness. They actively sought you out, and if you were spotted by one, they'd immediately go to chase you. Volatiles in Dying Light 2 only start to chase you at chase level 3, otherwise virals would be the primary threat at night. Volatiles were otherwise not present in the game whatsoever, until the Good Luck Good Night update. This update changed how nighttime works, having volatiles roam the streets like they did in the first game, with howlers being much more rare. The trouble is, I feel like they went way overboard with how many volatiles are actually roaming around. In Dying Light 1, you'd maybe have 1 or 2 volatiles roaming in a given area, and they were spread out enough to give you options to navigate through them. They were extremely rare to see on rooftops, only really going onto them to track you down if you gave them a reason to. Otherwise, they were almost exclusively on street level. In Dying Light 2, there's like 4 to 5 volatiles roaming around in a given area, and they're almost hyper aware of where Aiden is all of the time. They're also prolifically present across the rooftops, making it nearly impossible to be out at night and not in a chase. Stealth is pretty much not an option at night anymore, and the rooftops are far more dangerous than they were before the update. I also feel like not having the Howlers being a prevalent threat at night killed the unique identity of Dying Light 2's nighttime. The Howler scream is actually quite scary. And I feel as though they should not have been replaced entirely by volatiles. They should have kept their original idea of having howlers being the primary method of getting into a chase, but just throw in the odd volatile wandering amongst the infected, instead of replacing howlers almost entirely with packs of 4 to 5 volatiles. Not only did the Good Luck, Good Night update kill the unique identity of Dying Light 2's nighttime mechanics, it somehow also failed to recreate the tense atmosphere of Dying Light 1's nighttime mechanics in the second game, making them more frustrating instead of horrifying. There was a cool moment where a volatile did attack a camp of survivors though.
Goes like tweaking in a minute.
Motherfucking volatile right there.
Oh yeah, bro's just fucking chilling. Oh.
Oh sh. Hey,
okay.
yo, he's just attacking a whole fucking. Let me capture this, hang on. There's a couple of elements of the graphical design of the two games that I want to talk about. The first is something that is intrinsically built into the Dying Light 2 engine that you do not have the option to turn off, and that is temporal anti-aliasing. What this does is smooth edges using previously generated frames and blends the images together to remove jagged edges. The trouble is this can cause blurriness, smearing, and ghosting on the final image. The best way I can put it is it's like your screen is ever so slightly fogged up, or you're nearsighted and your eyes can't make out details far away because they're all smeared and blurred. This option cannot be turned off, and the sharp option in the menus for it actually just applies a sharpness filter over the top of the image in an attempt to counteract the blurriness. In Dying Light 1, you actually have the option to turn off anti-aliasing, leading to a much more crisp and clean image at the cost of having jagged edges. This is somewhat of a subjective point, as some people seem to absolutely hate seeing jagged edges in video games. But personally, the trade-off for a crisper, cleaner image is worth it, and the clarity is much more noticeable to me than the jagged edges. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the lighting. Some scenes from Dying Light 1 look straight out of a movie or pre-rendered cutscene. The sunsets are spectacularly gorgeous, the nights are so dark you can barely see without the flashlight, and the harsh sunlight during the day feels extremely realistic. Bear in mind, this lighting is all man-made and handcrafted, so the job the developers did in Dying Light 1 with the lighting techniques available at the time is without a doubt mind-blowing. It just might be the best lighting I've ever seen in a video game. Dying Light 2's lighting, on the other hand, and I hope you'll forgive the pun, feels dim and lifeless. Dying Light 2 uses a relatively new technology called ray tracing, which is supposed to simulate realistic lighting via calculating how light rays interact with objects they come into contact with. If done right, this can massively impact the overall image quality of a scene, making it more vibrant and detailed. For some reason, and I'm positive I was playing with these options turned on, the magic of ray tracing just doesn't seem to work in Dying Light 2, with a lot of the game's lighting somehow looking worse than the supposedly inferior lighting techniques used within Dying Light 1. If anything, Dying Light 1's lighting looks more ray traced than Dying Light 2's. How this is possible, I don't know. However, what I do know is Dying Light 1's lighting looks superb compared to the ray-traced lighting within Dying Light 2. In this section, I want to go over some extra little things that really bugged me that I feel are important enough to mention, but they don't carry as much weight as the rest of the other sections do. This one is purely a Dying Light 2 problem. The second game has so many useless tutorials, and I have so many examples of this that it is baffling. Right, get this, okay? Near the beginning of the game, there's a dark tunnel filled with sleeping infected that the game provides a path for you to navigate across, to teach you that you should not wake sleeping infected. Towards the end of the prologue, they give you a tutorial on how to not wake sleeping zombies. Why? You taught me how to do this already in this tunnel section. Why are you reminding me? There's another moment where when you first encounter substations, it gives you a tutorial teaching you that you need to connect the power source to a panel, noting you need to be careful of the length of cable you have left. Simple enough, right? Well, when you encounter another substation near the VNC Tower mission, they give you near enough the same tutorial on how to do substations. Except here they teach you about multi-function power panels. The issue is, though, it's such a useless tutorial because they teach you in gameplay how to get through the door by making a ridiculously easy puzzle to teach you how to use cables for multiple functions. All you do is plug the cable in to power the first door, then when it's open, take that same cable to the next door to power it and open it up. Why do you need to tell me how to do this? Oh, and don't get me started on the nighttime missions tutorial. They put this here purely because they put a timer icon next to the missions that occur at night, rather than putting a moon icon next to the quest to begin with. They even give you a tutorial on how to unlock legend levels, for God's sake. I don't need an entire pop-up to tell me how to do this. I can infer that they'll unlock once I'm finished with this current skill tree that you gave me a tutorial on how to navigate. And I know what you're thinking. It's just a tutorial window. Just dismiss it. It takes 3 seconds to dismiss the window. Combined with the sheer number of tutorials that pop up for so many useless things that in the majority of cases get taught to you through the gameplay anyway, they become really annoying really fast. Whew. It goes without saying that you're going to encounter some bugs at some point within the two games, but whereas in Dying Light 1 they were small funny things like a zombie grabbing me through a wall or a mysterious disappearing window, in Dying Light 2 they were much more jarring and immersion breaking. Characters sitting on nothing, volatiles being frozen and invincible, zombies being invincible, shopkeepers refusing to move so I can talk to them, the Flash. Oh my god, what the f***? Though I'd admit this one is kind of funny. Most of the bugs in Dying Light 2 are reminiscent of an unfinished game versus Dying Light 1's bugs that are more akin to systems interacting in unintended ways. Plus the sheer amount of bugs that are in Dying Light 2 compared to the first is just... wow. Oh my god. And the dialogue. So many characters just give ginormous exposition dumps about characters that don't matter in the grand scheme of the story. They talk and talk and talk and talk. So much time is wasted having to tell the entire backstory of a character no one is going to care about later on in the game. Herman, Sophie's bodyguard, gets his entire backstory told to you, only to be dropped completely after you fight him. Barney's best mate Birdie gets an entire exposition dump about his backstory after he's dead. We interact with this kid for all of about a minute before he dies. Sure, his story is sad, but it's super rushed. So much time is spent on it for no reason, and honestly, by the second half of the game, I forgot who he was, and he's barely relevant anyway. This happens so often for characters who have almost zero impact on the story whatsoever. And the entire game is like this too, which is why me and my friend Giggles ended up dubbing the game Dialogue 2, because there's so much of it. Had they given far shorter expositions about who these minor characters were, yet kept the focus on the things that really mattered, I feel the pacing of this game would have been far better. Right, I've got to calm down for the conclusion now. To sum up my concluding thoughts about the two games, so I can finally put this to rest, I fully believe Dying Light 1 is better than Dying Light 2. Don't get me wrong, Dying Light 2 does do some things really well, like the combat and the decisions you can make within the side quests, but in almost every other aspect it falls short of the first game's tight presentation and polished gameplay. Popular consensus seems to agree with my opinion, considering Dying Light 1's overall reviews sit at an overwhelmingly positive, next to Dying Light 2's somewhat positive reception. Dying Light 2 has so many issues that are fundamental to the game, like its story, its parkour system, its graphics, its night system, and its design, that you'd have to overhaul the entire game to make it into something good. The various updates that have been implemented since its release are proof of this. They've all improved on various aspects of the second game to bring it closer to how the original game was, yet they still fall short. There's even an E3 demo version of the game in mod form, which brings it closer to what it looked like in the initial trailers before the entire ground-up rebuild after its lead writer got fired. The game looks incredible in this mod, and seems to play much more like the original than the current state Dying Light 2 is in. I feel this is the reason that the first game is clearly better than the second, if they've been trying to make the second game like the original, both the devs and the community. I also hope this much more in-depth analysis of the two games compared to my original video both helps you better understand how and why I like Dying Light 1 more than Dying Light 2, while also giving you an example of what a real sequel is supposed to look like. Before I wrap up the video and show you some bloopers and funny moments from recording, I feel I need to give my thoughts on Dying Light 2's second expansion turned standalone game, The Beast. It should be noted that I'm writing this at a time where the game isn't out yet, and all I have to go off of is the single announcement trailer they released 2 months ago from writing this script, so take my opinion with a pinch of salt. With that being said, I find this trailer to be really odd. My initial reaction was excitement. They're bringing back Kyle Crane, the main protagonist of the first game, and a fan favourite character whose fate since the following expansion has been left unknown. But when they revealed what Crane looks like, I was perplexed beyond comprehension. At the end of the following story, Crane visibly starts evolving into the Night Hunter, a playable zombie in the player versus player mode, Be the Zombie from the first game. This is what the zombie looks like. People have made comparisons between the look of the Night Hunter and Kyle Crane, noting they're wearing similar clothing, leading to theories that they're one and the same. This is pretty much also confirmed when at the literal end of the following story, Crane lets out the Night Hunter's roar after seeing his deformed arm. So you can hopefully understand my confusion then, when the Night Hunter looks like this, yet Crane in the Beast trailer looks like this. Why is he human? His arm was transforming at the end of the following. How has he reverted back to being human again? What moisturizer does he use? I need some. He also acts much like the Night Hunter in the trailer, which is why this shot of Crane is super jarring. I thought we'd get to let loose with some cool zombie powers instead of being a human again. Though I have a feeling that the confusion in how Crane is acting might have something to do with the fact that knowledge of what the expansion was going to be about got leaked. Techland didn't like this, so they've decided to repeat the same mistake they made with the second game and completely rewrite the story of the expansion. People have been theorizing that the story was originally meant to be from the perspective of a more feral version of Dying Light 2's protagonist Aiden, who is struggling to keep his infection under control. This would explain the initial footage of him tearing through the soldiers in the beginning of the trailer. He'd go on to discover Kyle Crane, and we'd get to interact with him from the perspective of Aiden, who is suffering a similar fate Crane is. But since the plot was leaked to the public and the secret that Crane was going to be in the expansion was revealed, they decided to pull a switcheroo and change the perspectives. Though in order to do this, they've had to magically make Crane human again for their human gameplay to make sense, but in doing this they contradict the canonical ending of the following. Considering the whole rewrite didn't serve to benefit Dying Light 2's base game story in the end, I fear the same fate is inevitable for the beast. I'm hoping this is not the case, and I'll still play it to give it a chance, but my hopes are not high, especially considering they seem to be struggling to even give a release date or any information for that matter regarding the state of the expansion. Thankfully, I managed to record that bit after the reveal at the Game Awards, as they finally managed to actually give a release date and a new trailer for the game. Sadly, I'm still not impressed, purely because they aren't showing Crane transforming. It makes me question if we'll really get these zombie powers they keep on hinting at. And I believe that is absolutely everything I have to say about this series. If you've made it this far to the end of the video, I applaud you. Well done. Hopefully it all made sense, and hopefully you also enjoyed. If you want to see more content from me, I highly suggest my Patreon, as there's a whole slew of content and updates for you to digest there. And if you're feeling extra generous, you'll also end up here at the end of the video. A special thanks goes out to all of my Patreon backers, especially the top patrons whose names are showing up here. I finally have more than one, yay! Thank you all also for watching this video, it means the world to me. Please do consider liking and sharing this video to show your support for free, and if you subscribed just now, then I will be seeing you in the next video. Enjoy the bloopers and funny moments.
I take you as, and pronounce you,
Craftmaster? Really? Oh my gosh, thank you.
Oh!
Oh my god. I don't need to read a lot.
I'm not gonna lie as well. Did I really have to sit there for like 10 seconds of my life listening to bro go, and in there.
Peacekeepers catch wind of our plans. So, we win?
Okay.
Oh, can I quit now?
If you want, I don't mind.
Aiden, the plan. It's in there. You know.
Son, I'm proud of you.
I'll tell him for you. I promise.
I'll tell Bevan what happened.
Fucking music in the background.
Bro, I'll tell Bevan what happened, bro. What's he doing? Staring at the shelf, bro. What the f is he doing?
Don't mind me, I'll tell Bevan what happened. Hold on, bro, don't mind me. I'm gonna go tell Bevan what happened.
How you doing? That's that me espresso. It is volatile here, he's over here.
Bonk, 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 bonk. Sit your ass down. This game just became so much fucking easier.
Wait, what? I got you up. How did you go down? What?
Viral.
Wait, bro, what?
Oh, I love this game! Bro, why do I launch these motherfuckers like 7,000 feet in the sky? Look at this.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we know how you primates like to swing from the...
Did you skip it?
No. No, that is literally just a dialogue.
We love how your monkeys swing from vines, and then the quest just ends. What the actual f is this game's side quest? They're so sh. Oh, more dialogue.
Dialogue too.
I fucking missed him from 2 feet away! Brother! I just fucking pencil dived straight into the fucking water. I forgot where I put the key. Thank you, Mr. Crane. You fucking stupid man, proto-monkey brain.
It literally is just that. Thank you, Crane man, you stupid simian ape man.
Bro was gone.
Yay.
What the f was that?
Bro's cooking, bro's
Nah,
cooking.
bro, listen. Nah, listen, bro. Oh my god, what is this? I don't care. Go away. Oh my god, another one. How many? Here's your. Oh.
What the f? Is you good, bro?
My fucking head came off, bro. Absolutely stomped her. Wait, kick him this way. He won't move. It looks so funny on my end. You kicked him into the explosion and he just like flopped upwards. We've got to talk to.
Not time sequence.
Got to talk to Gruh. Where'd that get you?
Gruh. Instead of goof.
There's no one inside. They took Zera and drove away.
Bro said that like he was.
My guy. Oh, and I've also got. Oh, you ready to see me tweet?
Yes, sir.
We'll just walk around them. What? Oh, fuck's sake. Oh, no, there is. Well.
I had to test it out.
Oh! Whoops. My bad, gang. I can't trade with this guy.
What? Oh, is he like over in the corner for
Yeah.
me? He's right in front of me for me. That's crazy.
Why? Walk here, bruv! Oh my, completed AAA game, by the way.
Legit.
Brother! Oh my days, this fucking game. I don't know why, but the way I said that, it reminded me of the guy saying, "Oh! Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! I've never seen that happen before. That was a genuine jump scare." Help me, Bev.
Hold on, Bev. I'm firing down.
That zombie just fucking flew up.
Stop this 12346. It's over now.
12346.
Why did the zombie float away like a fucking balloon?
Clip that, I want to see.
What? Your camera went. That is so funny.
Like, shut up, bitch. Be blinded with a light.
Shut up.
Have a fucking seizure on me, bro.
Be lobotomized.
Actual lobotomy, bro.
What about you, Aiden? Don't you want to stop running?
I want to stop living. Make it stop.
Alright.
But help me!
Oh my god, brother.
Can I like...
Only it's green.
What, you fucking died?
Is that... Boom at Aiden.
The rota! You have to climb up to the rota!
Oh!
No, come back. What is this, bro? What is this? Hakon's literally clipping through the fucking box, bro. He's just fucking just giving shit.
Ladies and gentlemen, working video game. Let's see what... Oh! Oh, no! Oh, brother, come on. Shit it.
Yeah, she'll be behind the door as soon as you open it.
I held my UV flashlight on it for so long, he just collapsed.
Turn that shot.
Ceremonial mask.
Yo, is this a Cry of Fear reference? I'm so lightheaded, bro. Oh my god.
Bro really pulling up with David Guetta, Where Them Girls At slowed.
No, come on, that's a good song.
So many girls in here, where do I begin? Oh! Came first and got some extra XP. And this one is not... I literally drop kicked this zombie and like it took none of her health out and then she just dropped dead.
Dies from cringe.
Literally.
Very nice, yes.
Hello?
Oh, I can't see, bro. I'm lightheaded. I'm hanging out. He's not even attacking us.
Bro cannot fathom. Oh, bye. Oh! Finished game, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my
finished,
God,
finished game.
My honest reaction to that information.
Thank you for your attention.
You're fucking welcome.
That was such a funny joke. If bro hit me that hard, I'd probably start speaking like. Stand back, stand back, stand back.
Got it.
Get me.
Kyle Crane, the simian ape man, is among us.
The Kyle Crane Simian man is moving in the Bruv, that is like every dying light meme I could think about. And if gonna happen, nobody happen.
Me actually having a genuine. Oh my god, the door's tweaking, bro.
The door is tweaking, and so am I. And especially had an issue with Rise, believing him to be a really cliche villain. Dying Light 1's main. Why? Stupid monkey ape man! It establishes Aiden, our main character, and Spike, a now aged quartermaster from Dying Light 1, as why did I imagine Spike turning into his older version and me fading it in like that? From here, you go to the fisheye with Lawan to meet a fresh set of characters. Jack Matt, the... Why did I immediately think of Aiden? In Dying Light 2, they were much more jarring and In Dying Light 2, they were much more jarring and Fucking hell, what am I emotionally breaking?